Hello, dear viewers. Support me by subscribing to my channel and share my video if you like it. And also, make sure you comment your thoughts. Now let's start the video. All time. Whenever he wasn't in the company of his sister or the other commanders, Jaime was constantly getting beaten by Bronn in their sparring with one dirty tactic after another. He was kneeling on the ground in their training yard, clutching at his chest that was struck multiple times by a tourney sword. He looked up at Bronn, who as always looked amused at his great victory. "You seem especially happy today," Jaime grunted as he stood up, recovering from his injury. "It's not every day you get to beat a Lannister with a hand made out of gold." "Oh, wait a minute. Yes, it is." Bronn laughed his famous chuckle as he tossed Jaime's sparring sword back to him. Bronn twirled his own sword in his hand before taking his stance, ready for another match. Jaime stretched his shoulders around for a moment before taking his own stance, waiting for Bronn to make the first move. Jaime knew this would end up like every other match had, with Bronn standing over him while he would be defeated by his own hand. Bronn finally took the first swing, aiming low for Jaime's left leg. The swing was purposefully slow, but still at a speed that was challenging for Jaime. He parried the strike and took the offensive, aiming for Bronn's upper body. Bronn was allowing Jaime to be the attacker, easily parrying any strike that was swung. Jaime decided to use this opportunity to play by Bronn's rules. In almost every duel, Jaime had kept his right hand tucked close to his body to keep it out of the way, but the moment Bronn left an opening to his right shoulder, Jaime swung his sword up. But when Bronn caught the blade with his own, Jaime swung his golden hand in between Bronn's legs, earning a grunt out of him when he struck. Bronn was caught off guard before Jaime backhanded him in the face. For the first time, Jaime defeated Bronn in a duel. He couldn't help but feel some pride in this moment. "You're learning," Bronn said, before he swept his leg behind Jaime's feet, causing him to fall on his back. Before he could get up, Bronn was over him with his dagger at Jaime's chest. "But you're still just a fancy lad in a duel." He pulled his dagger away and offered his hand to Jaime. He accepted the help, but as he was being pulled up, Bronn brought his other hand to Jaime's face, punching him back to the ground. Jaime grunted as he ow on the stone tiles, "My point proven exactly." All of a sudden, the sound of clapping could be heard from the steps that led to the private training grounds. Jaime and Bronn both glanced to the source and saw the leader of the Golden Company, Captain Harry Strickland. He was a man in his mid-30s with long brown braided hair. His short beard was a lighter color and was starting to gray. His build was very good for a sellsword of his age. He wasn't dressed in his armor, though. Instead, he wore a navy blue long coat that had no sleeves, exposing his arms that only wore leather bracers. At the collar of the coat was a pin of 3 golden skulls, all connected by a golden sword piercing through them. At his hip were 2 swords. His main sword was a falchion with a pommel of skulls and as gold as his company. The other sword was actually a short sword, sheathed in a leather scabbard. The hilt was not beautiful like Harry's falchion. All it had for a handle was fabric wrapped around the tang. When Harry was done clapping, he walked up to Jaime and offered his hand to him. This time, however, Jaime refused it, getting on his feet by himself. "Captain Strickland," Jaime addressed. "Harry, my lord, the only ones who call me captain are my men." His voice was deep and coarse. One could mistake him to have a northern accent. Harry brought his hands behind his back, assuming a gallant pose. "I heard talk that you're planning on a truce with the Targaryen queen and the king in the north." Such information wasn't private, so of course he would have found out. It's a possibility. "My brother claims there's an even bigger problem coming from beyond the wall." Yes, I've heard about wildlings before. Didn't think they could pose much of a threat, but enough numbers can be overwhelming. As much as I wish it were wildlings, it's not, since they're all south of the wall. This was obviously puzzling to Harry. I thought the wall was meant to keep them out. It was, but then the Night's Watch kept claiming that an army of the dead was coming. Jaime spoke with all the doubt he could, but there was a small part of him that couldn't help but be curious to know whether or not it was true. Tyrion said he'll have proof soon enough. Until then, we're doing what we can to shore up our defenses. It would seem so, but with the odds we're at, I'm surprised that your sister hasn't surrendered. She's not one to give up easily. I noticed, though, I must warn you, I hope the battle comes soon. Our elephants are meant for the heat of Essos. I don't think they'll fare well in the snow when it falls. Then it's a good thing they're in Dorne. The snows that reach there are only light flurries and melt quickly.
Wanting to change the subject, Jaime found the only thing about Harry that caught his attention. Interesting choice of weapon, though, with what you're getting paid. I'm surprised you don't get a proper hilt made for your sword. Jaime looked down at Harry's short sword, earning a grin from him.
I could, but I never use it anyway. Harry drew the sword out of the leather scabbard and offered it to Jaime. As he took it in his hand, he was able to get a closer look at it. The width of the blade was like a bastard sword, and the length was half of the same. It wasn't until the reflection of the sun left the steel did he notice an important detail about it. Valyrian steel? Harry nodded to him, confirming his guess. That there is all that remains of the sword Blackfire. Blackfire? That was both impressive and a bit of a child's dream. Come true for Jaime. He once desired to go off on a journey like his uncle Geryon to find a lost Valyrian sword, and now he held the remains of a legendary sword in his hand. I thought the sword was lost after the first Blackfire rebellion. No, just taken away to Essos by Aegor Bittersteel. The sword's been passed down to each leader of the Golden Company ever since then. What happened to the rest of the sword? Bronn asked. Seems like a complete waste to just use only half of what it was. My predecessor, Miles Blackheart Toyne, had an encounter with Sir Arthur Dayne. He was outskilled, of course, but Miles was able to cut through one of Dayne's swords like butter with Blackfire. Then finally, Dayne's final strike with his sword, Dawn, cut right through Blackfire as it had just done. Miles surrendered and was shown mercy by the young Kingsguard. Ever since then, he never returned to Westeros. As for the half with the hilt, even I don't know the answer to that mystery. Jaime looked at the blade again before remembering what Harry said about it. Why don't you use it? It's something I do. Figure I'll get a song sung about it someday. Bronn snorted at his statement. What a wonderful song it will be. A mercenary captain who never used Valyrian steel. Title could use some work. I never use it because my enemies always do. Before a battle, I offer Blackfire to them. If they refuse to take it, they accept surrender, and all is well. And if they take it, Bronn asked, then I'll see them on the battlefield and take back what's mine from their cold, dead fingers. Jaime's brow arched, slightly impressed by the captain, but only slightly. He held the sword back to Harry, finished with his inspection. You say Arthur Dayne did this with the sword Dawn. I'd imagine a knight like you would know the story about that sword. Harry said as he took Blackfire back and sheathed it. I do. It was forged from the metal found in a fallen star where Starfall was raised. Harry grinned at Jaime's knowledge, tilting his eyes up to the sky. Valyrian steel was like a gift from the dragons. Whatever metal made that sword was a gift from the gods. He bowed his head to both Jaime and Bronn. Good day, my lords. Harry walked away, back up the stairs to the city. Bronn walked up next to Jaime, impressed. First sellsword I've met with a sense of honor. They seem to be scarcer than men like Ned Stark. Cersei's handmaiden, Bernadette, passed Harry down the steps. Approaching Jaime and Bronn, Cersei, Jaime, Queen Cersei demands your presence in the small council. Jaime nodded to her, and he and Bronn left the training court, done for the day. Instead of at a table, the small council resided at the large map of Westeros Cersei had painted on the floor in the Red Keep. Cersei stood next to Sir Gregor Clegane, his presence more darkening than when he was in the Kingsguard gold and white over by the Crown Lands. Qyburn stood across from them over the Westerlands. When Jaime and Bronn entered, they were at the shores of Dorne, Harry Strickland close behind them. Sir Bronn, Cersei said, thank for escorting Sir Jaime, but your presence will not be required for the rest of the day. Just as good, your grace. Bronn told them, I have my own business to attend to anyways. There's a beautiful woman in a brothel calling my name. No one gained any amusement from him, but he didn't care as he left Jaime to the others. Cersei walked over to the north, looking down at Winterfell. We have a problem, she addressed. We've just received word that the bastard of Winterfell has married the dragon whore. Cersei was never short of insult when it came to her enemies. With the north under her control, it won't be long until we're surrounded from the north and the south. There's also the Iron Fleet. Jaime reminded, now that Theon Greyjoy's taken command, Euron has only just over 100 under his command. Combined with our own ships, we don't even have 200. Yes, I know. Cersei exclaimed. The fool was so busy trying to look like a god to his men, he forgot that he's only a rat. She turned her gaze to the southern kingdoms. What news of Dorne, the Stormlands, and the Reach have we received? Wyvern was the one with the answers. There are 8,000 Dornish soldiers, but the lords will not act as long as we have Aliara captured. The Stormlands are seeking a new liege lord before they give us any attention. From what my little birds have sung, Selmy of Tarth is gaining the largest support. And the Reach? The Dothraki have taken residence in Highgarden, but the lands remain untouched and the people unharmed. With the Tyrells gone and Lord Randyll Tarly and his son dead, Lady Melissa Tarly has been chosen as the governing Lady of the Reach by the other lords. But with the Dothraki occupying their lands, the Reach is at a standstill. Cersei did not look pleased, but it didn't stop Qyburn from going on. There's one more thing, Your Grace. There have been whispers in the north about a boy who is said to be the bastard of your late husband. Cersei froze at the mention of that. Even Jaime was taken a bit by surprise. That's not possible. They were all executed on Joffrey's orders. Not just the ones in King's Landing, but throughout the Seven Kingdoms. I understand, Your Grace. But there was one who slipped away from the city when the order was given. From what I read from the reports regarding the matter, he was traveling with the Night's Watch and reported killed. However, a small detail sparked my curiosity. Cersei turned to face him, waiting for his explanation. The reports listed a physical description of all of Robert's bastard children, and all of them had black hair, except for one. The one traveling with the Watch. The company was captured by your father's men and taken to Harrenhal. After he left, there was a report that some of the prisoners escaped. One of them was working as a smith, and the information given on him before the search matched his description. If Cersei had something to throw, she would have done it, and now he's under the protection of Jon Snow? They all had received word that Jon was discovered to be the true-born son of Rhaegar Targaryen and Lyanna Stark, but that didn't stop Cersei from denying it. Jaime wasn't sure what to think on that. He read the reports about evidence that Rhaegar had married Lyanna and not kidnapped her, which would explain a few things from when he was a Kingsguard. That part he was willing to believe, but Jon Snow being their son, it made too much sense that it had to be, he is, Your Grace. Qyburn continued, working in the Winterfell forges, trying to recreate Valyrian steel. This earned some snickering from everyone else, except from Sir Gregor. Jaime didn't know much about forging, but he did know that no one has been able to create the steel since the Doom of Valyria. Widow's Wail and Oathkeeper were reworked from ice, but not made from raw material. I suppose since they have dragons, they think they can, he suggested. He already did, Sir Jaime, Qyburn informed, ceasing the derisive attitudes. Although my spies inform me he was only able to make one sword, the rest of his attempts have been failures for reasons they do not know. There was silence as everyone went through the details of the situation over again in their heads. As it seems, Harry started, things aren't looking too well from this side of the war. If they figure out what the problem is and fix it, not only will we be outnumbered, but we will be outmatched in equipment. Jaime knew something like that would anger Cersei, but she remained calm about the whole thing. Her gaze turned to him, a smirk slowly raised on her face. Captain Strickland, I can imagine that, in all your years living in Essos, you must have managed to make some friends in the right places. I have, Your Grace, but even favors have costs. The costs are of no concern of mine, but winning the war is... Very well. Are there any type of favors you have in mind? Cersei's smirk grew, looking vile, even to Jaime. Do you have any in Bravos? The day was growing old, and Jaime felt he needed time to rest after all that was going on. He was in Cersei's solar, relaxing on a coach while she went over some documents delivered to her. The more he went over the odds of winning the war in his mind, the more the outcome became worse. No matter how much wine he drank, he couldn't get rid of his dread. Cersei took notice to this and got up from her desk. Something troubling you. He knew she didn't even have to ask to know what was troubling him. We are not going to win this war. Even with the Golden Company, now that the North, the Iron Islands, and the Vale fight for Daenerys Targaryen, we are hopelessly outmatched. How long will it be until the other kingdoms realize this and decide to be on the winning side? So, you wish to surrender? Hand the throne over to the Targaryens and hope they at least give us quick deaths when they kill us. With Tyrion as Daenerys' hand, he wouldn't let that happen. And what would our dear little brother do? Give us Casterly Rock? Live out our days in peace? She shook her head as she made her way over to the wine pitcher. That little monster has been set on destroying our family ever since he killed our mother. I'm amazed you've never seen that even after he killed father. Jaime hated Tyrion for doing that, but he didn't believe Tyrion was out to destroy them. He sat up and leaned over. brushing his fingers over his golden hand. We could leave Westeros, away from all danger and chaos, and give them the crown. I'd burn the city to the ground before doing that. A shiver ran down Jaime's spine as he remembered similar words spoken by a previous king he served. He denied she meant it, but after what happened to the Septim Baelor, it didn't sound as unbelievable as he thought. He shook the idea out of his head. What about the armistice? If there really is an army of the dead coming, we might be able to negotiate a deal with Jon Snow and Daenerys Targaryen. Cersei only laughed at him. Should I ask Qyburn to examine you? I'm afraid you might be going mad. They could destroy us if they wanted to, but they haven't. Why wouldn't they? They care too much about peasants and common folk. As long as we keep our armies close to them, the dragon spawn and the bastard won't bring their beasts near us. If they move against us, they'll find themselves ruling over corpses. The more she seemed to speak, the more Jaime couldn't push away the feeling he had that Cersei was starting to act like Aerys Targaryen. Jaime got up and made for the door. Where are you going? He needed to get away from all the talk of war and relax for a moment, something he was hoping to do with Cersei originally. To find Bronn. I need something stronger to drink. The ales of the taverns in Flea Bottom were awful. Jaime had drunk horse piss that tasted better, and it wasn't a lie. The noise was too loud, and the smell was terrible. But at least it took his mind off of the war. Bronn had already downed 2 mugs of ale, and was now working on his third, as Jaime explained the situation. Bronn gulped down his mouthful and wiped his mouth clean of the drink. Your sister's right, he said. As long as we keep our men close to good citizens of the realm, they won't rain dragonfire upon us. Now all she has to do is think of a way to have their armies not attack us either. Even Jaime couldn't think of a way. His father was the one who always had a clever plan, though he doubted his father would have one even now. Ever since they learned about Daenerys' dragons hatching in Essos, he always doubted their potential. And now here he was, commander of the Lannister army with sellswords and a broken fleet at his back, and 5 dragons, and too many men at his front. What would you do? Bronn just shrugged. I wouldn't say. Your sister might be foolish enough to try it if her spies heard me and told her. Jaime sighed, realizing he was heading straight for what he was trying to avoid by being here in the first place. Did you enjoy your woman? He inquired, not able to think of what else to talk about. Bronn snorted at him, amazed. I just spent my time with a whore and you're asking if I enjoyed it? You'll have to enjoy it while you can before you're married to a highborn lady. Jaime reminded before taking another drink. Do you think being married ever stopped anyone from fucking whores? Didn't stop Robert Baratheon, that's for sure. Didn't stop your sister from fucking your cousin either, while you were Robb Stark's prisoner. Jaime choked on his ale, coughing up what he just drank. It took him a moment to recover before he was able to talk. What did you say? She never told you? Bronn looked curious and cautious at the same time. Your cousin Lancel kept her bed warm while you were away until he joined the faith. His confessions what got her thrown into the Sept dungeons. This was shocking and angering at the same time. He remembered when he returned to King's Landing and she denied him her company, telling him he took too long, but she never told him she slept with Lancel. That's it, Bronn said before finishing his final mug. You're coming with me. He stood up and grabbed Jaime by his coat, pulling him up from his seat. Where are we going? Jaime asked as he was led out of the tavern by Bronn. To some place no little birds will be. As they walked through the streets of King's Landing, Jaime began to see the condition of the people. Many of them looked starving, and others had hardly any proper clothes to keep warm for the coming winter. When Marjorie was queen, he never saw such a sight. They finally came to a stop at the broken-down doors of Littlefinger's brothel. Jaime was surprised Bronn chose this place, but not surprised that it was going to be a brothel. As they stepped inside, the rooms that were once elegant and inviting were now empty and cold. Markings of the Faith Militant were still present, and only rats occupied the building. Orthmen, we won't last the winter. She spent all the Tyrell gold on the Golden Company. And some other shite I don't know about. Our own resources are nearly depleted now that the Reach can't send food. Every ship is being used as a military vessel instead of fishing like they should be. To sum it all up, you have nothing. We have nothing, Jaime corrected. You're a part of this too. I was. But that was when I was made a lord and promised a castle, and a highborn wife, which you have taken both from me and refused to give. Your brother, on the other hand, has a castle waiting for me, and a wife. He offered to make me a liege lord, but it's too much work, so I'm settling for just the castle. Though I will admit I never did enjoy the cold very much, but it's better than being here without what I'm owed. Is there a point you'd like to make? Jaime grew irritated at all of this. He never suspected Bronn to keep his loyalty for long. He was still just a sellsword after all. Bronn sighed as if it wasn't already made. I'm telling you this, in hopes that you understand the situation. I like you, I do, but I'm being the smart person, and looking at my options before the time comes when it's too late. And soon enough, the lords who've pledged themselves to your sister will be doing the same thing. She can't protect them, she can't feed them, and she doesn't care about them. So why should they call her their queen? Because she's sitting on the Iron Throne? Jaime hated what he was saying, but he knew it was the truth. What are you asking of me? Nothing at all, but I'm advising you to try and get your sister to see the same thing. What do you think I was doing before I found you? Bronn was silenced, looking at the ground, and shaking his head. Jaime decided to leave, but before he was out the door, Bronn asked him a question. Would you do it again? Jaime looked back at him, confused. Do what? If the Mad King had returned and ordered the city to be burned with wildfire, would you kill him again?
Jaime looked at Bronn as if the answer was obvious. Of course.
Well then, go put your sword in her rather than your cock. And we're saved. Jaime reached for the hilt of his sword, which he wasn't carrying. He was completely unarmed, but Bronn wasn't. Before you get angry, just remember that she blew up the sept, killing your son's wife, a woman he loved very much, even if she was manipulating him. Your uncle, a niece, and a nephew. Looks like she's killed more Lannisters than your brother now. Jaime turned back around, leaving the office and the brothel. Tommen, Uncle Kevin, Lancel, Serena, all dead because of what Cersei did. When he reached the streets, he couldn't help but imagine seeing Cersei on the Iron Throne, screaming like the Mad King, burn them all. He fell back on a wall, sliding down it until he was sitting. He stared off into the streets ahead of him, wondering what he would really do if he faced that decision. Jon. After 2.5 weeks of nothing but riding on horseback, Eastwatch by the Sea finally came into view. It was Jon's first time ever seeing the castle, and he had to admit he was impressed. Castle Black used a lift to get to the top of the wall, but here one had to climb what seemed like countless steps. Jon and his company could see dozens of men walking up and down the steps, more than Jon's ever seen in a single castle. In the harbor were 10 ships, all wearing black sails. As his riding party drew closer to the gates, a horn blasted, signaling them to open. As they entered Eastwatch, a party of brothers of the Watch greeted them. At the front was an elderly-looking man, just aging after 60. His face wore a dark gray beard from ear to ear, arching over his chin above his upper lip. Next to his left eye on his temple was a long scar reaching down to his cheekbone. His head was completely bald and riddled with brown spots. Commander Pike, Jon addressed as he dismounted. Lord Snow, he said. He's not a Snow, Davos said. He's Jon Targaryen, the King of Westeros. Forgive me, Your Grace. Commander Pike bowed his head to Jon, obviously in no mood for flattery. It's all right, Jon said, trying not to be demanding or boastful. I trust you received my raven. I did, and all I'm going to say is you're not taking any of my men, even if your wife's the one who got him here. I understand. We'll only be seeking the help of the free folk. You should know, Commander Pike said, sounding nervous. We haven't had any wildlings come through for 2 moons. They used to come at least once a week. Makes sense. The Night King's nearly done gathering his army. Well, fuck, I can't understand why anyone else would want to go north then. Anyone else? Are there others trying to go north? Follow me. Commander Pike ordered as the horses were taken by some Associ stewards to the stables. Jon and his company were led through the castle into the cold cells of Eastwatch. Caught some men camping about a mile away from here a month ago. One of them knocked out 10 rangers before a giant came and seized him. What was a giant doing here? Brienne asked. Apparently, the only wildling in the world who speaks whatever the fuck giants speak was here, and they needed a translator. They speak the old tongue, Tormund informed as they all stood in front of a cell filled with 4 men. 2 were sitting against the icy wall, huddled in the shadows. One of them was leaning against the cell gates, while the 4th was lying down on a bench, resting. Commander Pike grabbed hold of an axe. He kept in his belt across his chest. He banged against the cold steel, gaining the attention of the prisoners. Wake up, you shits. The 4 men, startled at the banging, looking over to them, the one sleeping, was instantly recognized by Brienne. Sandor Clegane, what in 7 hells are you doing at the wall? The Hound turned his head to her. rising up when he realized who she was. Brienne fucking Tarth, I could ask you the same question. Shut it! Commander Pike spat at the hound. He turned to Jon, gesturing to his prisoners. They want to go beyond the wall too. We don't want to go, one of them said. We have two. The one who spoke stood up from his seat, revealing his face. Jon didn't recognize him. Our Lord told us that the Great War is coming. Our place, be it on the battlefield or beyond the wall, is wherever the Lord guides.
Enough about your Lord Dondarrion. Commander Pike ordered.
Dondarrion? Jon inquired. Lord Beric Dondarrion of Blackhaven. I renounced my claim to my titles years ago. Beric told Jon, ever since the Lord of Light brought me back from the depths of darkness, I've served him and the common folk. Thoros, Sarajora said. The other man who sat next to where Beric was leaned closer to them, looking at who recognized him. I hardly recognized you. Sir Jorah Mormont. They won't give me anything to drink down here. I haven't been feeling like myself. Thoros slouched back into his corner, huddling with what he could to keep warm. Jon gazed over to the other man who was leaning against the cage before they entered. He had short brown hair and a short brown beard to match. And you are? And Guy, there was a pause of silence, Jon hoping someone would break it with knowledge of who he was. And Guy just shrugged, not caring if any did. I was a soldier for House Dondarrion before I joined the Brotherhood, if that helps. Before I was married, I was Jon Snow, the bastard of Winterfell, Ned Stark's son. Jon sighed, not wanting to explain the whole story over again right now. I was. Here we all are, Beric said, at the edge of the world, at the same moment, heading in the same direction, for the same reason. Our reasons aren't your reasons, Davos said, being firm in his voice. It doesn't matter what we think our reasons are. There's a greater purpose at work, and we serve it together, whether we know it or not. We may take the steps, but the Lord of Light... For fuck's sake, the Hound exclaimed. Will you shut your hole? Are we coming with you or not? Jon wasn't sure at first, but he wasn't about to argue when there were good fighters willing to go with them.
Don't you want to know what we're doing? Jorah asked.
Is it worse than sitting in a freezing cell waiting to die? Thoros asked. He's right, Jon said. We're all on the same side. Brienne looked over to Jon, being cautious of the Hound. How can you be sure that we are? We're all breathing. Jon looked over to Commander Pike, who just doubtfully shook his head as he unlocked the gates to the cell. As the cage opened, the men inside quickly walked out, eager to get someplace warmer. We have some gear, won our horses. What we can't spare, we'll borrow from the watch. Commander Pike just shrugged at him. As long as you don't take my men. They were given the common room to themselves to prepare. Everyone stripped themselves of any armor they had and replaced it with clothes that would protect them from the cold. As they all dressed in heavy furs and joined by 6 of the free folk, Davos brought in 2 rolled-up clothes and set them on the table. He unrolled them, revealing many dragonglass weapons, mostly daggers and hatchets. Davos looked to the Brotherhood remnants. These are made of dragonglass. They can kill the White Walkers and stop their soldiers. And Guy interrupted. Davos looked at him, surprised he knew. When you're in a cell for a month, you hear things. He looked through the selection and took 2 of the dragonglass daggers and placed them at his hips. He looked at the weapons again, seeming troubled. You got any arrowheads? Jon still had the pouch of them. Abroko gave him on Dragonstone in his satchel. He pulled out the pouch and handed it to Anguy. There's at least a dozen in here. Anguy took the pouch from him and emptied some of it into his hand. He inspected them carefully, looking pleased. Perfect. I just need some arrows and a bow and I'll be set. He placed the arrowheads back into the pouch as everyone else took a dragonglass weapons. The free folk brought dragonglass spears and a halberd for Tormund along with a thin axe. Lord Jon, Beric said, if I remember, you said you were a Snow before you were married. What do we call you now? King, Brienne told him. The other Brotherhood members looked up at him. You stand in the presence of Jon of House Targaryen. Targaryen? How'd you manage that? Save it for the walk. Jon said, as he replaced his steel dagger with the dragonglass dagger Abroko gave him. Finally prepared? The hunting party waited in the tunnel for the passage north to the gate to beyond the wall began to rise. A burst of air, colder than what they already felt, struck at them. Like a wave of water, snow stung past their faces. As the gate reached its height, the winds of the true north rushed through the tunnel, reminding Jon of the harshness he would be heading into. He looked back at those joining him, seeing if they were sure about this. He saw distress among them, but also determination. He took the first step and everyone followed after him into the blizzard. "So, King Targaryen," Thoros said loudly to break through the howling wind, "how'd you get to be a Targaryen?" The walk was cold, but bearable. After a few hours, the snow died down and the skies cleared, giving a warm comfort to everyone's faces. Jon kept to the middle of the group, letting the free folk lead, but also so he could enjoy the conversations he heard around him. After explaining everything that happened, starting when Maester Aemon died and the dragons hatched, Beric took this opportunity to have talk with Jon as they trudged through an icy landscape. "You look just like him," Beric said to Jon. "Who?" "Rhaegar. I only ever saw him once when I was a boy at Harrenhal, but I'll never forget his face, or those eyes, violet as amethysts. Though I must say, the black hair suits you more than silver would. But I must say, you are the spitting image of a Stark, like Ned was." "You knew him?" "Of course I did. When he was Hand, he sent me off hunting for the mountain. That's how I achieved my first death. Your wildling friend told me the Red Woman brought you back. Thoros brought me back after the battle, and 5 times after that, now you and I serve the same lord. I serve the North and all of Westeros. The North didn't raise you from the dead or gift you with dragons, and neither did Westeros. You're right, Melisandre raised me from the dead, and my uncle Aemon Targaryen gifted me with dragons. I never saw the Lord of Light when I died. I never spoke with him, never heard him. I don't know what he wants from me." "He wants you alive." "Why?" Beric simply smiled at him. "I don't know. That's all anyone can tell me. I don't know. What's the point in serving a god if none of us knows what he wants?" "I think about that all the time. I don't think it's our purpose to understand. Except for one thing. We're soldiers. We have to know what we're fighting for. I'm not fighting so that you or someone else can sit on a throne made of swords." Beric stopped and pulled Jon aside out of the way of the hunting party. "So what are you fighting for?" "Life, death is the enemy. The first enemy, and the last. But we all die." "The enemy always wins," Beric assured him, "and we still need to fight him, that's all I know. You and I won't find much joy while we're here, but we can keep others alive. We can defend those who can't defend themselves." That sounded like something Ned would say. You do what is right, because it's right, and that's all the reason you need. That was what the Night's Watch was when it was founded by men of honor. I am the shield that guards the realms of men. Maybe we don't need to understand any more than that. Maybe that's enough. Aye, maybe that's enough. Jon agreed. They rejoined the group and kept pace with them as they approached a range of mountains. As they pressed on through the rocky slopes, Jon took interest in the conversations involving the Hound. Brienne seemed to keep her distance, but now she finally decided to get up close to him. Jon kept his pace behind them, eavesdropping. "Thought you died in your fall," Brienne said. "I wish I did, then I wouldn't have to stuck you lot, freezing my cock off looking for walking dead men." The Hound told her. "You haven't changed a bit," Brienne smiled. "Thought Arya would have done that since she spared your life." The Hound turned his head to her, finally showing an expression other than aggravated. "You found her? She came home to Winterfell shortly after her brother Brandon. Who's protecting her if you're here?" "She would have been the one in place if I didn't go. Beside, the only one who needs protecting is whoever gets in her way." The Hound smiled for the first time Jon had ever seen him. "It won't be me. You should come back with us to Winterfell. I feel she's getting tired of training with me. Neither of us can best the other. If I had the strength I had years ago, I'm not much of a fighter anymore. Just slightly better than most." "You're too hard on yourself," Anguy said, walking up next to Brienne and the Hound while stringing a dragonglass arrow. "We all lose our strength sometimes, but we can get it back if we work for it. I've never had to work for anything. I've only killed because that's what I was good at. And here you are, walking with a band of fools, going to kill that which is already dead. Would you fuck off already?" Anguy shrugged as he fell to the back of the hunting party. The Hound's gaze fell to Jon, noticing he was listening. "You too. I don't care if you're the king of Westeros or the fucking world. Piss off." Jon tried to keep his distance after that, but he managed to listen in on an argument with Tormund. All Jon could hear was talk about how gingers were beautiful, and they were kissed by fire. Jon remembered when Tormund told that to Sansa when they were camping before the Battle of the Bastards. The hunting party never stopped moving. As they passed a valley next to an icy river, Jon could feel the moral dropping and the mood dying. Anguy felt this as well. and decided to begin singing the bear and the maiden fair. Beric and Thoros joined him while everyone else kept to themselves, either because they didn't want to sing or they didn't know the words. Jon personally never heard the song, but feeling bored, hummed with the tune.
By the third time they sung it, Brienne became irritated for reasons Jon did not know. "Don't you know any other tunes?" She called out to them from the back of the party.
"Afraid not, milady," then guy said. "I know one," Jorah said. "Compliments to our new king." Jon turned his head to Jorah, hoping he wasn't going to sing what he thought he was. "How'd you learn it?" Jon asked. "I've been at Winterfell for over 2 weeks, and it's the only song I've heard people sing there," Jorah told him. "Now that's a song I know," Brienne said, smiling. She and Jorah both began to sing the song of the Night Dragons, Jon keeping his eyes to the ground, buried in embarrassment. By the second time they sung it, everyone except for the Hound knew the words and joined them. Jon as well, though after singing over and over, they all grew bored of it. "Can't you think of another verse?" Thoros asked. "I didn't write it," Jon told him. "My dragons taught it to me. That's all I know and all they've sung. Maybe because they want you to keep it going," Thoros said as he took a quick drink of his rum. They pressed on through the entire day and didn't stop as dusk approached. A new storm began to swallow the sky, and even though the sun was gone, there was still light from the brightness of the snow. A light flurry began before the heavy flurry would consume them. As the hunting party reached the foot of a mountain they passed, the Hound stopped and looked out to the mountains in the distance. Pointed out to the largest peak. "That's what I saw in the fire, a mountain shaped like an arrowhead." "Are you sure?" Thoros asked. "We're getting close," Sandor assured. Bran walked next to the Hound, looking out to the mountain. "You mean to say we've been following a vision you saw in a fire?"
"You got a better idea?"
Bran's eyes dropped to the ground, thinking of something better, yet she remained silent as she continued to the mountain with the others. The storm of snow turned into a blizzard, and the winds pushed against them, as if they were a force to keep others away from the evil they sought after. The Free Folk guide who led them through caught a lead ahead of them and continued to fight against the snow and the winds. Frost began to form from the sweat of their brows, and the warmth of their furs had nearly disappeared. Tormund suddenly tapped Jon, pointed out to an object in the distance. "Look." Everyone but the guide stopped and tried to make out the shape. "A bear," Sandor said. "A big fucker. He's got a rider." Barely visible, Jon could identify the shape of a snow bear and someone riding atop it. "It could be Warg," Jon said. The bear stopped and turned its head, revealing a deathly light. "Do bears have blue eyes?" Brienne asked. The bear and the rider disappeared in a flash of white, only to reappear, but heading straight for them. The guide noticed this and immediately turned around, running back to the others. The bear disappeared in another flash of white as the guide kept running. Everyone drew their weapons and readied for their tangle with the beast. But as the guide was nearly there, the bear reappeared, charging at him from his side. In an instant, the bear chomped at the guide, picking him up and carrying him away, screaming, and once again disappearing. Jon and the others ran over to chase after them, but all they found was a patch of snow, stained blood, and the guide's dragonglass spear. Everyone formed a circle, keeping watch for where the bear might strike again. The winds around them howled as the fear began to form, as nothing continued to happen. Once they were inside Littlefinger's office, Bronn sat down at a windowsill. "Now, it's time for you to hear the cold truth, if you're ever going to live through all of this." He waited for Jaime to give him his full attention. "With Cersei as the queen, we're all gonna die, even if by some miracle she defeats the Targaryens and the inn." Behind Jon, a loud roar came out from the blizzard, and the bear appeared as if from nowhere. It pushed forward one of the free folk, launching him into the snow. As he tried desperately to crawl away, the bear sank its teeth into his back. He screamed as the snap of his spine sounded through the screaming winds, and then he lay motionless and lifeless. Jon charged forward at the bear, hoped a powerful strike from Longclaw would be able to kill it, but when the blade met the bear's skin, it hardly scraped it. The muscle was decayed, but still tough. The bear swatted at Jon, sending him flying into the air, back to where he was. As he hit the ground, Sandor knelt down to him, pulling him up as Thoros and Beric ran their hands on the edges of their swords, igniting the blades in magical fire. They charged at the bear as it looked for its next victim. The dead rider atop of it dismounted as the bear stood up and sliced the chest of a free foe clean open. When he fell to the ground, the bear sank its teeth in his back and did the same thing he did the first time. Varric swung his sword down on the beast, igniting it instantly when the blade touched its hide. The rider was engaging Tormund with a sword that was broken in half, he was easily disarmed, and the other free folk surrounded it, trying to make the capture. The bear charged at them, shoving them aside, and spread its fire to its rider. One of the free folk carrying a spear tossed it aside and tried to tackle the right into the snow to douse the flames. But as he brought it down to the ground, the right's strength was greater and it freed an arm, instantly clawing at the face of its attacker. Its fingers grabbed hold of the free folk's jaw and pulled it off before grabbing a dagger at its belt and rapidly stabbing his neck. Before the free folk bled out, the right it ceased moving. The bear fended off the others as they attacked at it. Engay shot a dragonglass arrow at it, but Tay became stuck in its hide. The bear swatted at Brienne, missing her, but able to get her to back away. It turned its gaze to Sandor, who stood frozen from fear. The bear was nothing, but the fire scared him. As the bear charged at him, Thoros shoved him aside and blocked the bear's chomp with his sword. Thoros was pushed to the ground, and his blade wound up trapped in the bear's jaw, clenching as hard as it could. Tormund charged at the bear with his axe, landing a powerful blow to the bear's head, but it shoved him away as if it was nothing. Thoros' sword was ripped from his hands, and the bear bit down into his body, breaking many ribs. Thoros cried out as he was slid side to side by the bear, attempting to tear him apart. Jorah finally sank a dragonglass dagger deep into the bear's body, killing it for good. It collapses off of Thoros, and he continued to burn. Engay retired his arrow and dragged Thoros away with Beric. They rested him on a small lump of snow and lifted his robes, revealing the bloody damage that was done. His skin was misshaped and his muscle exposed, bleeding from the tears. Sandor stood near him, looking at the suffering Thoros took instead of him. Jorah walked to Thoros, examining his condition with everyone else. "We have to get him back to Eastwatch." Thoros shook his head. "No time," he grunted. "Flask." Beric padded through the Red Priest's robes until he found what Thoros wanted. He uncorked it and put the tips to his friend's mouth, letting him drink as much as he wanted. Jon knew he couldn't keep bleeding, and so did he. When he was done, Thoros looked at Beric as he pulled the flask away. "Go on," he said. Beric held his flaming sword over Thoros' chest and brought the blade down onto the wounds. Cauterizing them, Sandor turned away as Thoros moaned and ground his teeth, while the sizzling sounded and the smell erupted. Jon recognized it from when he burned in wildfire. As Beric pulled his sword away, Thoros calmed down. "You all right?" Beric asked. "I just got bit by a dead bear," Thoros reminded.
"Aye, you did." Beric grinned at him, knowing full well what happened.
Thoros' brow arched high. Funny old life. Beric sank his sword into the snow, dousing the flames of his sword as he and Engay grabbed hold of Thoros and helped him onto his feet. Jon was inspecting two of the dead free folk, discovering the direction the tracks came from and the direction they would be heading. Arya. The twins seemed to have a more peaceful setting now that all the Freys that meant a damn were dead. The Riverlands were just starting to receive a greater part of the winter. When Arya left them, the lands were only covered in a thin layer of snow and frost. Now the lands resembled the north in the summer, thick snows and cold waters. The water around columns of the Twins' Bridge started freezing, forming a second bridge of ice. Had the Freys been alive, many might even choose to use it rather than pay a toll. The skies were clear, but the sun burned cold, giving no heat to those underneath its light. Since all the Freymen were dead, save some baby boys who held the family name, the castle was occupied by the women under the watch of Tully and Lannister soldiers. Edmure acted as the lord and operated the dealings of the Riverlands from the castle. From what Arya had heard from the people in taverns she stopped at during her travels, her uncle was still practically a prisoner. As for why, she reasoned that it was to keep him far away from his wife and son, reminding him about his situation. As she approached the Eastern Twin on her horse, she was stopped by two Lannister at the edge of an encampment made just outside the castle. It consisted of maybe 100 men, but Arya wouldn't need to fight her way through. "Oh!" one of them said. He was in full armor, hiding almost all detail to identify him. The only thing Arya could tell was that he was at least middle-aged. The soldier with him was a man, barely 20, carrying his helmet under his arm. If you wish to cross, you'll have to pay a toll to the Lord of the Twins. I'm not here to cross the bridge. I'm here to bring a message for Lord Edmure Tully from the north. Arya pulled out a letter, sealed with wax stamped with the Stark direwolf. If that's all, then give it here. We'll deliver it. The older soldier reached for the letter, but Arya pulled it out of his reach. I'm afraid my instructions are to deliver this directly to Lord Edmure. No one is allowed to see the Lord unless we allow it. Then it seems we have a problem. I need to follow my instructions, but I can't see the Lord. Before the older soldier could spit out some useless argument to her, the younger one tried to handle things. I know that being from the north, you probably have absolutely no trust in men with the Lannister colors. Regardless, we have our orders. But if you'd find it acceptable, I can ask our captain if he'd allow one of the Tully soldiers to deliver the message when he returns. He isn't here now. He's gone for the next 2 days, but if you have the time to wait, there's a tavern we use sometimes that's not far from here. You could stay at... Perfect, Arya thought. The two soldiers looked at each other, the older one shrugging to the younger one. That works for me, the older one said, obviously tired of lazy. He turned to head back to his post as the younger soldier bowed his head, smiling. That would relieve my worries quite a bit. I'll make sure to repay you somehow. There'll be no need for that. Safe travels, little lady. He rejoined his companion as Arya started back down the road. She took a path leading east about a mile down the road and followed it for nearly the same distance until she arrived at a small gathering of buildings. What was here used to be the makings of a village probably years ago, but there was much damage done, and the only building that had the least structural damage was the tavern. After tying the reins of her horse to a post outside, Arya entered the building amazed at the quality. Most of the taverns she visited tended to have a gross atmosphere, but this place felt warm and at home. Arya took a seat at a small table and ordered a pie and an ale. As her food was brought to her, she scanned the room for any Lannister soldiers. Her eyes caught the flash of a bright red cloak, and the man it was attached to. He was sitting at a table hidden by a wooden beam. His helmet rested next to his food as his sword up against his chair. His back was turned to Arya, which gave her the best opportunity to observe his actions. He was going over some documents while he ate, taking an occasional drink of his ale. It wasn't until a young woman brought him a replacement mug of ale did he seem to try and woo her, placing his hands on her thighs. She quickly escaped him, showing no interest in him. Now I know how to get close. Arya finished her meal and left some silver for the server. At her horse, Arya filed through a satchel and found the face of the girl who fed pies to Walder Frey. The Lannister soldier was almost through writing his letter, requesting for more supplies from King's Landing. He sat back in his chair, exhausted and unhappy. He'd been in the Riverlands for 3 years and hadn't been inside a woman the whole time. When he fought in the War of the Five Kings, all he had to do was flash the Lannister red, and girls would submit to him. But now that they were ordered to keep the peace and the Tully forces were fierce and ever watchful, his attention was redirected to a young woman's dress that brushed his body as she walked him. He looked up and lusted after what he saw. The lady who wore the dress was the prettiest he'd seen in the Riverlands. She sat down at the table across from him, setting down a basket filled with kindling she carried. She only had an ale brought to her, and she took notice of the eyes that watched her. She cracked a tiny smile as she took a drink of her ale. The soldier got up from his seat, bringing his mug with him, and approached her table. I've come to this tavern every day for the past 6 months, and I know everyone's face here, except yours. I'm here to find work. The Westerlands are growing dangerous with those foreign savages in the Reach. All of our soldiers aren't there to keep us ladies safe anymore. Her voice was seductive and soothing to hear. Can't be much better here. Now that the wildlings are past the wall, it's only a matter of time before they come down here. Then it's a good thing that the Riverlands are filled with brave lions to protect us. What name does this lion have the pleasure of being? He smiled at her, enjoying the conversation. Tristan Hills. What kind of work are you looking for? The kind that can keep me warm through the winter and in my bed. The only problem is, I can't find a single brothel anywhere. Tristan's eyes widened with excitement. You're a whore? Don't be ridiculous. Whores will fuck anyone that flashes money at them. And you don't? She stood up and brought her head to his ear, whispering softly, I don't fuck for money. I make men lust after me, like they've never even touched a woman before, relieving that desire, something I can assure you have never felt, not even in your dreams. But I can fix that if you'd like. Tristan's free hand moved on its own, as his felt the warmth of her hip. His hand was suddenly slapped lightly as she leaned back from him, looking into his eyes. When the first stars light the sky, come back and find me here. She smirked at him as she walked past him and out of the building with her kindling. He'd never been as hard as he was in his life. Tristan drank the rest of his ale and gathered his things, leaving for his camp. As twilight darkened the sky and the stars appeared, Tristan returned to the tavern, but before he got to the entrance, he heard the lady's voice calling to him. My brave lion. He turned his head and saw the lady in the doorway of one of the abandoned buildings. The second floor of it flashed the light of a lit fire. She smiled at him as she went inside. He practically ran after her into the building. The first floor was a destroyed mess, but when he reached the second floor, it was cleaned and almost refurbished. A fire was lit in a makeshift pit, and there was a table with 2 mugs resting atop it. Wouldn't it be better if we had a bed? I'm sure the tavern has a spare room. It does, she told him, but we won't be lying down. She removed a shawl from her shoulders, exposing her cleavage she protected. She picked up one of the ills and handed it to him. Wine and ale make everything taste better, wouldn't you agree? Such a thing has never been wrong. He took the mug and took a long drink, ravishing in its contents. It's wine, the best I've ever had. It's an Arbor Gold. It's amazing. Where did you get such a drink? I had some left over. From what? Tristan finally noticed that she hadn't had any of hers. The last feast of the phrase. Tristan looked down to the wine in shock, realizing what he just drank. He dropped the mug and grabbed at his neck, feeling a sting arise in it. He fell to his knees as he felt a burn erupt from his stomach and seared his throat. The woman knelt down, timed him, and leaned him forward. Careful now. I can't have that armor stained. My lion? He coughed up his own blood and choked on whatever didn't exit his mouth. His head pulsed and buzzed, feeling utter agony as he collapsed to the ground and losing his vision. Then he was nothing. He was no one. Arya had never worn a full suit of armor before, and considering it was meant for a grown man twice her size and felt like someone was sitting on her shoulders, she didn't like it very much. She would have to get Gendry to make her a suit that fit her. She would want something light, but also resembling the traditional Stark armor. All the problems she felt disappeared when she put on her new face and became a Lannister soldier. He strapped his sword around his waist, retrieved the letter for Edmure Tully, and headed for the twins, leaving the faceless body in the woods to rot. As he walked past the camp, the Lannister soldiers gave no attention to him as he walked past them. Making his way through the castle, he finally arrived at the door to Edmure's Solar. He knocked and waited for a response. Come in. Tristan opened the door and saw Edmure Tully sitting on his bed. He looked like he was deep into his thoughts about something. He was dressed for bed and barefoot on the cold stone floor. He turned his head to Tristan, puzzled at his presence. What do you want? A letter from the north arrived this afternoon. Tristan held out the letter to the Lord as he got up and walked over to him. It's nice to finally get a letter that's seal hasn't been broken for once, he said, as he reached out for the letter. When his hands tried to pull it, Tristan resisted and tightened his grip, making Edmure look up at him, puzzled. Follows these instructions to the note, Lord Edmure, and everything will work out for the better. The North remembers. Tristan released the letter to Edmure and walked out, leaving him speechless. With the letter delivered, it was time to free the aunt and cousin of Arya Stark. Being part of the Lannister army, Tristan was free to cross the bridge at will. After he had made it to the west side of the twins and gotten far away from the castle and the camps, he removed his face and returned to who she was. Arya then disposed of the Lannister armor and gear, but kept Tristan's face with the others. The moon was high in the night sky, and she had a long journey to Riverrun. After 3 days riding, she only had 1 day left. The snows weren't as deep this south in the Riverlands, and the Tully soldiers were scarcer. Arya was on her horse, trotting down a path, enjoying the light snowfall and the smell of the trees in the winter. It was much different than when she traveled with the Hound to the Eyrie. Things felt more peaceful, and she didn't have to be on the run. As Arya approached a small wooden bridge over a creek, she decided to refill her water pouch and let her horse rest for an hour. She dismounted and pulled on the reins, guiding the horse to the water. As it lowered its head and drank, Arya retrieved her water pouch from the saddle and went a bit upstream and filled it up. She took a drink herself, enjoying the coldness of the flavor. When she exhaled after drinking, her throat felt like it would freeze instantly. Feeling refreshed, Arya returned to her horse and placed her water pouch back onto the saddle. She then reached into a satchel that hung over the horse and pulled out the piece of shattered steel and a metal file she swiped from Gendry's forge before she left. Before she left, it was just an odd shape, but spending some time filing out jagged points and smoothing the edges, the piece of steel was starting to take shape. As she ran the file up and down on the steel, she could start to hear the sound of horses approaching from the south. She looked up and scanning through the trees, she could see 4 Lannister men on the road heading north. She stooped her filing and put away the steel and file before mounting her horse to continue her travels. She crossed the bridge and began to hear the soldiers in a conversation, laughing and enjoying themselves. As she was about to pass them, they paid her no heed and she kept her gaze away from them on the road. In the corner of her eye, she noticed one of the soldiers' smiles vanished and turned into a scowl at Arya's hip. "Oi, girl," he called out. Arya stopped her horse and turned to face them, not saying a word. The soldier who called to her stopped his horse and dismounted, his companions doing the same, and approached her, but kept their distance. "What are you doing out here?" "Heading south to King's Landing." Arya lied. "Where are you from?" "I'm returning from visiting my family near the Twins." As Arya looked at this man, she couldn't help but feel she's seen him from somewhere. "That sword you have," he pointed to Needle. "Where'd you get it?" "It was a gift from my brother. He's a smith. It's quite a nice-looking little blade. The design must be one of kind. But it's such a coincidence, because I've seen one that looked just like that. My friend Polliver had a sword like that when we had Harrenhal, told me he nicked it from a boy in a Night's Watch caravan they captured." "Are you sure it's the same sword?" "Don't know. I only saw it once at Harrenhal before I left for King's Landing. But then I heard that Polliver was killed at an inn with my other friends by the Hound. His hand crept to the pommel of his sword, and a little girl he traveled with." Arya sighed and dismounted. When her feet touched the ground, the soldiers drew their blade and pointed them at Arya. "Are you sure you want to do this?" Arya asked, removing her cloak from her shoulders. "I've been in 7 Bellas. I'm pretty sure a girl who thinks she can fight will be easier than them." "I don't think so, considering you were probably at the back of the army, waiting for everyone else to do the fighting." Arya's provoking wasn't the best, but it was enough for the soldier to run at her, his sword held high and attempt to slash her. Arya easily dodged and ducked when he swung his blade again at her. His movements were horrible and slow enough that anyone could evade them. Having enough fun wearing him out, Arya drew Needle and redirected his blade away and fluently cut at the back of his knee, waiting for him to buckle before sticking the pointy end into his eye and quickly pulling out, waiting for him to drop. She twirled Needle around and kept it behind her back, waiting for her next opponent. The other men stared at her in shock before 2 of them rushed at her at the same time. Since the dagger was hidden on the saddle, Arya would have to kill them one at a time. The weak parts of their armor were at the joints and the neck. Sliding to the right, Arya spun around and planted Needle in the shoulder of a soldier, cutting an artery, and his blood began to empty from the wound. He fell to his knees, turning pale and dazed. He fell into the blood-stained snow moments later, before Arya parried 2 strikes from the other soldier, and managed to stick Needle into the man's mouth and out through the back of the head. He remained standing, but he was frozen in place and shaking. When Arya removed her sword, he fell to the ground next to his comrades. Arya looked up at the last soldier, who was the youngest of them all. He panicked and dropped his sword, running to his horse. He mounted it and rode as fast as he could to the north. Arya scoffed as she wiped the blood from Needle with the cape of one of her victims. The furthest Lannister camp she noticed during her riding was at least a day ahead, so she had plenty of time to get away. As for the bodies, the wolves could have them. Daenerys. Only a month had passed since Jon's departure, and the nights without him next to Daenerys felt cold and lonely, but the days awake felt even lonelier. In every meal, the only one who gave her much company was Missandei, and Tyrion. However, they had their priorities elsewhere, since Missandei had taken it upon herself to learn some of the wildling languages to treat with them better, and many of the few Dothraki that accompanied them from Dragonstone often fell into disputes with the Northerners, and neither could understand what the other was saying. Tyrion, on the other hand, was stolen by Varys, Samwell Tarly, and Sansa Stark, working on preparations for the army of the dead. He had come up with many strategies about how to defend the wall, but today they would discuss what to do if the wall did indeed fall as Brandon Stark said it would. Luckily for today, Missandei was with Daenerys as they broke their fast, and oddly enough, joined by Rickon Stark. He ate his bread and honey while Missandei was speaking with Daenerys. Your Grace, I was informed by Lady Stark that some of the Wildling Elders are coming to Winterfell. They desire an audience with King Jon concerning some matters at the Dreadfort. Do we know when they'll be arriving? Daenerys asked as she took a small bite of her pork sausage, but found something about it not to her liking. According to Lady Stark, they'll be arriving in 3 days. Daenerys started to feel a headache come over her. She didn't even know what the problem with the Wildlings was, but it seemed to give her some worry. I don't think Jon will be back in 3 days, maybe not even 3 weeks. But I know he'll come back. We'll have to solve the matter ourselves, if they can't wait for his return. Daenerys' gaze turned to Rickon, who was listening in on them. Of course, we'll need the help of the Lord of Winterfell and future Warden of the North. Rickon swallowed his food, not looking happy, but rather nervous. I think you'll want Sansa to be there instead of me. I'm not even 12 yet. And the Lady of Bear Island is just over Elven, but if my lord desires, I will not require it of you to attend. However, I would advise you attend anyway when it happens. From what I've seen of you so far, you've shown all the qualities of a good lord. You only lack a bit more education and the confidence to act in certain situations. Rickon looked down at his hands, appearing doubtful. I just don't feel all that ready, so I'll just watch. He resumed eating his bread, taking large bites out of it. He looked back at Daenerys and Missandei, his mouth full of bread. Hallbagwith had half-uns go. Daenerys and Missandei tried to restrain their giggling at Rickon and his reminder that he was still a child. I beg your pardon. Rickon swallowed his bread before repeating his question, how big will the dragons grow? Daenerys couldn't say. When she landed at Dragonstone, she thought Drogon was at the largest he would ever get, but in the north she'd already noticed his and his brother's size grow. I honestly don't know the answer to that question. The largest dragon I know of was Balerion, Aegon, the Conqueror's dragon. His head was the size of carriage, and Drogon isn't far behind that size, but I'm sure that there were dragons even bigger than that before the doom of Valyria. That was when all the Valyrians except the Targaryens died, wasn't it? It was, but from what I understand, there were some others who survived the doom, like a Dargan lord named Orion. He raised an army of 30,000 and tried to claim what remained of Valyria, but he, his dragon, and his army disappeared without a trace. So Orion had a dragon, but wasn't a Targaryen. I do not know which family he belonged to, but a Targaryen he was not. So it's possible for others to fly dragons. Daenerys could see the hope that gleamed in his eyes. It wasn't hard to tell that he wanted to ride one of the dragons. I don't know the answer to that question. The Valyrians had magic that gave them the ability to bond and ride the dragons. I'm not certain where they acquired it, but things of old seem to be returning at a great amount. I won't say that it's possible, but I will say it's not impossible. Rickon smiled at her and finished his bread. Thank you for your time, your grace. I have to go do my drills now. He got up from the table and practically sprinted out of the Great Hall. It reminded Daenerys to finish her meal as well. Today she would be attending the War Council concerning defending the North instead of the Wall. Since the Great Hall was occupied for meals for the time being, she was told that the others were meeting on the balconies overlooking the courtyards. The whole walk to where they were gathered was exhausting. Daenerys' headache continued, and the walk to the balconies felt like it was miles away. She felt tired and worn out, wanting to return to bed. Daenerys and Missandei were greeted by Tyrion as they joined him. Lord Royce and Lady Sansa, your grace, I'm glad you could make it. He looked delighted to see them, but it turned into concern. Your grace, are you feeling all right? You look a bit out of the weather. It's just a headache, Daenerys sighed out. Please don't let it bother you. Tyrion nodded his head, regaining half of the smile he had. If it persists, I'll see if Maester Walken can get you some milk of the poppy. Daenerys smiled back at him, letting him know that would be fine. Where is Lord Varys? I'm afraid he won't be joining us this morning. He said he had an urgent matter regarding some news he heard. Daenerys grew curious, but set her thoughts aside to focus on the meeting. Now then, until we have room in the Great Hall to look over our map, we'll have to just go over options before the possibilities of them. Lord Royce decided to voice his idea first. The first thing we should determine is where the dead will strike at the wall. They could attack any one of the manned castles to add more troops to their ranks, or go for one of the abandoned castles to get past any resistance. Though even with the increased number of men at the wall, I hardly doubt there will be any resistance at all. As much as I'd like to disagree, Tyrion said, Lord Royce is right. The largest amount of men manning a castle at the Night Fort, and they have just over 1,000 men, though from what I have learned from our king, Eastwatch will be where the army will march at, most likely. And how do you know this? Lord Royce asked. Jon said that the White Walkers were gathering their army near a wildling settlement called Hardhome. The closest castles to it are Eastwatch by the Sea, Greenguard, and the Torches. I believe one of these three will be their target. I've ruled out Greenguard and the Torches because neither of them have a door to beyond the wall, and the Torches have the feature to signal the other castles from Eastwatch all the way to the Woodwatch, which is basically a short trip to Castle Black. Like you said, until we have a map, we can't go over the possibilities, only the options. Lord Royce reminded. And what are our options? Sansa asked, regardless of what castle the army attacks. I had some thoughts, Tyrion said. One of them being that once the hunting party returns, if they return, Lord Royce said bluntly. When they return, Tyrion persisted, pleasing Daenerys, I suggest we pull all the men at the castles back and wait for the army to come. Are you mad? We'll be utterly defenseless when they arrive. And we'll need every man we can get. The wall is fortified more than it has been for thousands of years, but even if all of the Night's Watch manned the exact castle that was going to be attacked, it would be 4,000 against almost 150,000. And it wouldn't even be 4,000, only 800 since that's how many of them are Rangers. If we are absolutely certain the wall will fall, we probably should pull back every soldier we can and fortify Winterfell, prepare for the attack, set up defenses. They were suddenly interrupted by the raging of Gendry at his forge. From what Daenerys knew, he had gone through several more blades after his 5 failures trying to make Valyrian steel. She couldn't provide any more dragon blood, and Sam had been scouring his books vigorously trying to find an answer. He was calmed down by Varys, who appeared as if from nowhere at the right time. That reminds me, Tyrion said. Since we can't seem to get any more Valyrian weapons or dragonglass, I suggest we find a second solution next to burning the army with dragonfire. We have pitch, Lord Royce informed, but not much at the moment. I can order for more to be made and shipped to Winterfell within the fortnight. We'll do that regardless. If we'll need it or not, it never hurts to be prepared. Assuming that we can get more, I doubt we'll have much to make a difference. So we'll need to get a hold of something already made and in vast quantities, and I have a solution. It wouldn't happen to be in King's Landing, would it? Sansa asked. Indeed it is, my lady. The Alchemist Guild has many storerooms full of wildfire, unused, and in great numbers. I'm sure Cersei won't just give it to us. Daenerys said. No, we'll have to have it smuggled out of the city. And luckily for us, we have a smuggler at our disposal, and a man I trust in King's Landing. The only thing we have to worry about are Qyburn's little birds. Bran could help us somehow. Sansa suggested. I'm still not sure how his visions work, but he might be able to give us something to our advantage in all this. Right you are, my lady. Tyrion replied. In fact, I was hoping you could talk to him later today. I've tried to myself, but he seems to always be in that state of, I'm afraid I forgot the name of it, but in the state of his eyes turning white. As they continued on, Daenerys' headache worsened, and she started to feel sick. Her mind was taken off the pain, however, when Lord Varys approached them on the balcony with Gendry. My lords, my queen, he took notice of Daenerys' condition. Are you feeling all right? You look rather ill. I think I might have caught a sickness of a sort, Daenerys finally admitted. I'll fetch Maester Wolkan. I'll be short of a moment. Lord Royce said as he walked away from them. Was there something you have to report, Lord Varys? Daenerys asked, leaning against the railing of the balcony for support. I have a report from my spies about a conflict growing in the Stormlands. It seems that Lord Selmy of House Tarth was going to be the new liege lord of the Stormlands and planned on declaring for House Targaryen. Did he have a change of heart recently? Daenerys asked. No, your grace. His heart stopped beating after he took a nasty fall down some steps. The other lords believe it to be an accident, but my little birds sing a song that is much more convincing in these times. It might be that Cersei had someone orchestrate Lord Selmy's fall. She even plans to do the same with other lords who are considering to declare loyalty to you. What about his children? Brienne is his daughter. Does she have any siblings? No, Your Grace. Brienne is his only descendant, making her the new Lady of Tarth. However, the others lords have returned to a state of confusion and are unsure who to follow. That's why I'm here. Gendry said, I've thought about it, and I still don't want to be a lord. But if I'm going to survive this war, I can't wait for it to come to me. I need to act now. He knelt down on one knee and bowed his head to Daenerys. If you would have me serve you as a lord, then I will. Daenerys, still feeling sick, gained her composure and stood over Gendry. Do you swear loyalty to House Targaryen, to the rightful king and queen of the Seven Kingdoms and the realm, to pledge your banners, your men, and yourself, to answer when called upon, to protect the lands you will hold and the people who will serve under you? I swear it by the old gods and the new. Rise, Gendry of House Baratheon, Lord of Storm's End and the Stormlands. Gendry rose to his feet, looking discontent, but also proud of himself. Thank you, my queen. When Arya sends word that the Riverlands are secure, I'll ride for the Stormlands. Daenerys smiled at him, pleased at his mature decision. If you wouldn't mind excusing me, I've got more work to do before I leave. Of course, my lord. He bowed his head and went back to his forges, except he switched to something else instead of Valyrian steel. Daenerys turned her head to Lord Varys, looking pleased. Was this your doing? I did next to nothing, Your Grace. Varys replied. I merely told him what I told you, and I reminded him that if he wants to be his own person, he should try doing it for once. I expected him to throw a hammer at me, but he seemed to contain the Baratheon fury. Daenerys suddenly collapsed onto the railing, feeling out of energy and her stomach churning. Daenerys Missandei stood next to her, holding onto her arm to give her some support. You need to get back to bed. I think that would be wise. Daenerys agreed. Allow me to assist you, Your Grace. Varys took Daenerys' other arm and helped her walk off back to her chambers. Before they entered the castle, the screeches of the dragons could be heard by everyone. Daenerys and the others looked out to the sky and saw all 5 of the dragons take flight. The force of Drogon's wings could be felt by everyone in Winterfell. Where are they going? Missandei asked. All 5 of the dragons began heading north, disappearing above the clouds. I don't know, Daenerys said, but she lost thought after she felt something arise in her throat. She knelt down and vomited onto the wooden walkway. Missandei and Varys both knelt down to her, checking her condition. Where is Maester Wolkan? Varys asked, looking around for him. Go get Sam. Daenerys croaked out before she let out more of the contents of her stomach. She started to feel disoriented and dazed, and the smell of the stomach acid filled her nose and made her face scrunch in disgust. She was helped up to feet before Varys and Missandei rushed her to her room. As she lay on her bed, changed into a nightgown, she started to feel better. The more she let herself vomit into a bucket she was given. Sam had finally arrived, carrying a few bottles and a book with him. Your Grace, he said. Forgive me for the wait. Maester Wolkan was out of milk of the poppy. And he's making more as we speak. I have some other things that will help you, but I need to check your condition first. Daenerys nodded at him and lay in her bed as he knelt down next to her. He placed his hand on her forehead, checking her temperature. Small fever, vomiting, headaches. Are you feeling nausea? A little bit? All right, he recorded all the symptoms onto a parchment he had as he went through them. This might seem personal, but when's the last time you bled? The last time was Daenerys thought about it and realized she hadn't bled for this moon, and her previous one was too long ago. It's not possible, she whispered. I'm sorry? Sam inquired. Daenerys ignored him for a moment and felt at her stomach, checking for any signs of firmness. Your Grace, Missandei said, could you be with child? Daenerys looked up to her, feeling doubtful. I can't be. Your Grace, Sam said. If I may. He gestured to her belly, hoping to inspect it himself. She nodded to him and allowed him to gently push against her skin. His eyes widened when he found a particular spot. Oh my, I believe congratulations are in order. He smiled at her, but she only continued to be in distress. She felt where his hands were and felt the firmness of her womb forming. The sensation of it reminded her of one she had long forgotten. She suddenly remembered what Jon had told her not long ago after the capture of Pipe. I can't have children, Jon. Who told you that? The witch who murdered my husband. As it occurred to you, she may have not been a reliable source of information. She put her entire palms over her belly and felt a warmth that was exactly like the dragon eggs before they hatched. She finally managed to show some joy and start to laugh. For years, she believed what the witch told her, but Urchi was now defying the curse placed upon her. But as she continued to feel, she noticed that it was different from her first pregnancy. It felt like there was more in her. She closed her eyes and focused on the sensation around her stomach. She could feel the life inside her, and there was more than one. 2, she whispered.
Her Grace?
Missandei asked. Daenerys opened her eyes and looked up at her. There's 2 of them. Twins? Sam said, amazed. A dragon and a wolf. Her headache finally began to die down as she forgot about everything else except this. Fire and ice. The Arrowhead Mountain provided a perfect place for the hunting party to recover and rest after days of walking without either. There was a deep cave that was small enough to be concealed and large enough to house everyone. The fires they made for warmth were small, and the wood burned a thin smoke that blended with the snow. Jon had already had his turn to sleep and was currently on watch duty, sharing a tough strip of venison with Tormund as they kept watch over the valley and mountains below them. Jon tore out a bite, finding difficulty chewing through the cold meat. Pass it here, Tormund said, holding his glove out for the strip. Jon gave it to him and looked back out into the storm, barely able to see a small canyon in the distance. He thought of the moment he saw the army of the dead with Bran and Rickon. The sheer size of it would make anyone tremble. It was the largest army in the world. For now, he hoped. Why'd you come with us? Tormund asked. You could have stayed with your woman, prepare for the war, stay safe in your castle, yet you're decided to come with us. Why? I don't know, I can't explain it, but ever since I saw the Night King raise his army at Hardhome, something in me had to come back. You're the craziest person I've met, if that's your reason. Jon looked at him, as serious as he could be. When I saw the Night King, he wanted me to know I lost, that I was going to lose again, and I couldn't stop him. And when he saw me, he knew I believed him. This is my chance to show him that we're not beaten and we're not broken. You're doing it because you have something to prove. I take it back. You're not crazy. You're fucking mad. You wouldn't understand. I understand more than you. I've lived my entire life in fear of the White Walkers, and never once has anyone I've ever known tried to do something just so that they could say, I'm not afraid. I'm not afraid. I'm terrified. You've lived your life like that, but I haven't. I always thought they were just a story until I saw them. I realized what they were and what was going to happen to us all. I can't let that happen to my family. If this is how we can finally get people to see the truth, they might finally realize that everything we've fought about in the past has been for nothing, and this is the true evil that comes for us all. For once, I wish you would stop doing things for others and do something for yourself. It's not a crime, you know. I am doing this for me so that I can protect my family, so I can protect my home, and so I can live after the wars to do something worth meaning. You Southerners are always full of drama. Everything has to have a grand reason behind it. You never keep things simple. I'm here to make sure you don't die, because you saved my people, that's it. Jon chuckled as the snows began to lighten quickly. There are some things we do for simple reasons. I rescued Daenerys from Euron Greyjoy because I was in love. That doesn't count. Tormund spat. Love is too complicated to be simple. Jon's brow arched. He was ready to counter whatever Tormund would argue with, but he found himself at a draw. Tormund ignored Jon as he walked forward, gazing out to the distance. Look there. He pointed out to a stream that ran through the canyon far away from them, and barely visible was a small party walking downstream. It's them. The free folk never travel out in the open in such a small group. How many? Jon asked, not able to see as well as Tormund. It looks like 9, maybe 10. I'll wake the others. Don't lose sight of them. The chase after the dead didn't take long. The hunting party arrived at a cliff overlooking the stream into the canyon. Jon and Tormund looked over the edge and saw the small troop of dead men consisting of 9 whites, and leading them was a White Walker. Where's the rest of them? Jon asked. If we wait long enough, we'll find out. Tormund reminded. We can ambush them downstream, start a fire to get their attention while we wait, and hide surrounding them. Then let's go. It didn't take long for them to get down inside the canyon to a good position. One of the wildlings started a fire with all the remaining wood they had while everyone else took cover, hidden out of sight from any who would pass by. With the trap set, all Jon could do was wait and listen. The only sounds that were made were the rushing of the water, the occasional crack in the fire, and the wind softly blowing. But through all of that, footsteps could be heard and the sound of ice cracking followed. Next to Jon was Jorah and the wildling, who started the fire, all of them waiting for Tormund's group to charge first. Sure enough, they heard the sound of the others yelling as they sprung the trap, and that was the signal to join them. Jon revealed himself and went straight for the White Walker. He instantly had to parry a strike from the blade of ice, and the Valyrian steel singed with each strike. The others were caught fending off the Whites, trying to cripple and disable them rather than destroy them. As Jon ducked under the ice blade after a vicious attack, he struck Longclaw across the belly of the White Walker, and it shattered into bits of ice. Before he knew it, Jon saw the Whites collapse into nothing but life piles of cold meat and bones, all except one. The hunting party surrounded it as it growled and hissed at them like an animal that only wanted to kill. They all kept their distance, cautious of any wild attack it might try to do. As they slowly closed the space between them and the White, Tormund tossed his dragonglass halberd to the side and let the White charge at him. He easily punched it to the ground before the Hound and Jorah piled on top of it. Before they could tie the White up, it let out a bone-chilling screech that echoed throughout the canyon and beyond, like a beast crying out to its brethren for help. The Hound took one hand off his battle axe and covered the White's mouth, trying to silence the dead man, but the flesh of his lips tore off. Moments later, what was thought by everyone to be the sounds of thunder turned into the sounds of a glacier cracking. The noise came from the foot of a faraway mountain, followed by a familiar, unnatural snowstorm. They were coming. Jorah quickly put a bag over the White's head as Jon scanned for the directions they could go. They wouldn't be able to outrun the army the way they came, but they might stand a chance if they could get to a high ground that only they would be able to climb, then they could flee with a lead. Jon saw a clear area down away from the stream, and it looked like their only option for now. With the White bound, they set off as fast as they could, away from the oncoming doom, though they wouldn't get as far as they hoped. The weight of the furs and boots they wore and the deep snow slowed them down. In the clearing, the ground was flat, and a small patch of rock rose out in the middle. But once they set foot on the flat ground, it cracked with each step. "Stop!" Jorah yelled as they looked down and realized they stood on ice. They were going to have to be careful not to break through. However, when they all heard growling and shoving behind them, they turned around and saw a horde of Whites coming after them. They charged like ants, each White trying to climb over the other to see who would get there first. "Go!" Jon yelled as they all sprinted as fast as they could to the rocky island. Jon hoped they could get to the other side of the frozen lake fast enough, but more Whites appeared and ran faster than him, encircling the lake and trapping them. Jon made it first to the island and looked around at the surrounding army. They didn't have any openings they would be able to take, so they would have to fight until the death. He then looked over to others still running. Tormund, Brienne, and Guy, one of the wildlings, and the Hound had caught up with him. Beric and the last wildling moved slower, assisting Thoros, and the dead were catching up to them. The wildling slipped on the ice and collapsed, but he got back to his feet and ran as fast as he could, but the dead were catching up too fast. He wasn't going to make it. One of the Whites got right up behind him, but before he could be tackled the wildling, Angai shot an arrow right through its skull. It stopped in its track and collapsed, tripping the Whites behind it, and caused the ice to break and the Whites to fall in. The ice continued to break all around them, creating a perimeter of safety that protected them. Jon let out a sigh of relief as the wildling caught up to them, out of breath as everyone else. After many Whites fell into the icy waters, they stopped moving and just stood in place, like guards keeping their prisoners in their cells. Sandor walked up to the top of the island and dropped the White to the ground, letting it squirm and grunt in the snow. "Fan-fucking-tastic snow," he shouted. "We got our dead man. Now what do we do?" Bran shoved him in the shoulder. "He's not a snow. He's the king. Do I look like I give a fucking damn about who the fuck is king right now? Fuck you. Fuck the dead." He turned his gaze to Jon. "Fuck the king." He walked away from Brienne to the edge of a rise on the island, staring out to the Whites, who continued to surround them in vast numbers. "He has a point," Angai said. "How do you expect us to get out of here now? Unless you brought a dragon with you. I doubt we'll be able to fight our way back to the wall." "I didn't bring one with me," Jon told them, "but I can get 5 here instead." All heads turned to Jon as he sheathed Longclaw and walked over to a rock that emerged from the island. He sat down and got as comfortable as he could. He began to warg, but he wasn't able to find Rhaegal or the dragons. He wasn't sure how he did it from Pike, but this time it felt like something was keeping him from going south of the wall, as if something was holding on to him. After a while, he returned to himself out of the void and felt exhausted. Tormund was kneeling next with Ange, who watched in wonder. Did it work? Tormund asked. Something was blocking my reach to the dragons. I couldn't get past the wall. As I said, Sandor began, what the fuck do we do now? Jon thought of why he couldn't reach the dragons. He was able to warg as a raven with Bran and Rickon when they flew over the wall, but maybe it was different in the true north. Maybe he had to find something north of the wall and bring it south. If you see a bird anywhere, I might be able to fly it south to Winterfell, then I can get the dragons. That's not going to happen at all. Tormund informed, almost every animal knows to avoid the dead as pure instinct. The ones that fail to flee are just more meat for the Night King's army. Tormund pointed his halberd out a section of the dead high on a cliff, consisting of snow bears, dire wolves, and foxes. The eyes of blue shined brighter in the animals than they did in the eyes of the whites. Jon took a good long look at everything that surrounded them. He saw whites, animals, and giants, all gathering around the frozen lake. The numbers were in the tens of thousands, and still the dead continued to appear. But even after seeing everything he did, he knew that this was nowhere near the entire army, and the number of whites appearing started to dwindle. He turned to everyone with him and could see the fear and doubt in them. Brand, Jon whispered to himself, if you can hear me, I need your help. Night fell and no one had the courage to rest. The air grew colder and the dead hadn't even budged since they first ceased moving. With their supplies gone and the fires that radiated from Beric and Thoros' swords were not large enough to give enough heat, everyone paired together and huddled with each other to keep warm. Tormund tried to get with Brienne, but she had already claimed Jorah, not trusting anyone else but him and Jon. The Hound was the only one who refused, but after hours of shivering, he gave in and joined Angie with the rest of the Brotherhood. Jon felt himself starting to feel out of mind as the stares of the dead continued to linger on them. No matter where he looked, the eyes of blue were there, looking into his very soul, though he could think of a worse situation. It was better for him to be able to always see that which watched him rather than not be able to, but constantly know that he was being watched, never able to find who was looking at him. Thoros. Jon heard Beric speak. He turned to look at the Red Priest, realizing he stopped moving. Jon got up and walked over to Beric, Angai, and Sandor with Tormund, inspecting the situation. Thoros lied in the snow, his eyes and mouth open and his skin as white as the snow. Beric pulled the red robes over the priest's face, the only possible burial respect he could do. Sandor knelt down next to Beric, offering any sympathy he could. They say it's one of the better ways to go. The Hound found Thoros' flask and took it from him since he wouldn't be needing it anymore. He uncorked took a small drink while Beric said his prayer. Lord of Light, show us the way. Come to us in our darkness and lead your servant into the light. Jon knew that having a dead body around them was risky, given what could be coming to join the army of the dead soon. He snatched the flask from Sandor, who did not look pleased at him. We have to burn his body. Jon poured the rum over Thoros' body, covering as much as he could. We'll all be close behind, Tormund said, unless the Lord of Light is kind enough to send us a bit of fire. Beric drew his sword and ran his hand on the blade, igniting it in flames. He lit the body and allowed it to burn for a moment. Lord of Light, come to us in our darkness, for the night is dark and full of terrors. For the night is dark and full of terrors. And Guy repeated as Beric stabbed his sword into the ground, dousing the fires of his blade. Despite what happened, everyone couldn't help but gather around the burning body to fight against the cold. Everyone except for Sandor. He stayed away, not out of respect, but fear of the flames and the smell. It didn't take long for the body to turn into a charred husk. The brief moment of warmth was gone, and everyone was back together, huddling for what qualified as heat. The white continued to squirm and grunt. The only noise other than that and the shivering were the sounds of ravens in the distance. Jon looked up to the sky and could see a flock of ravens overhead, circling the lake. Thank you, Bran, Jon said, as he immediately warged into one of the ravens. The flock ceased circling the lake and immediately flew south. Jon unwillingly followed them, feeling the instinct of going home. The sensation he felt the first time he was a raven returned to him, but he had a better understanding of it now. As a raven, his perception of time was different. He didn't care of how long it took to fly, only that he would get to his destination. The earth below zoomed by, and before he knew it, he passed the wall and was back in the north, but he had to wait until he saw the dragons to warg into them. As quickly as the first light came to horizon, it was followed by the sun, and it became morning by the time Winterfell came into sight. The flock of ravens landed in a dead tree near the castle, and the dragons were in the fields, resting together in the snow. Rhaegal lifted his head and looked directly at Jon, sensing the presence of his rider. Jon left the raven and warged into all 5 dragons. Aegris, Lyares, and Rhaegal all heard him clearly, but Viserion and Drogon seemed to ignore him, pushing aside anything Jon tried to communicate to them. Help us. He could sense the worry of the 3 dragons that listened, but he also felt discontent among Rhaegal and his brothers. He growled at Viserion and Drogon, becoming angry at their laziness. Drogon snapped his jaws at Rhaegal, merely trying to scare him away. Jon was losing his grip on Rhaegal. Their purposes grew too far apart, and he could feel himself slipping, but then he felt all 3 of Daenerys' dragons' thoughts align with one another as they felt something affecting their mother. The dragons turned their gazes to the castle, sensing something new, something precious to Daenerys, something precious to Jon. Whatever it was, it changed the minds of Drogon and Viserion, and the same thought coursed through them, and Rhaegal, keep our family safe. They were the first to take to the skies, the other 2 following as quickly as they could, heading for the source of the call. Jon suddenly felt pain. A great dull stabbing pulsed in his mind. Something was breaking his link with the dragons. He returned to himself on the island, sweating and out of breath. He was on his hands and knees, gasping for air. Beric and Brienne were kneeling down to him, making sure he was all right. "You're back," Beric said. "It won't be long now. We just have to wait until the dragons get here." "I don't think we'll last that long." While you were gone, we were joined by more spectators. Jon looked up and was mortified at the sight. The army of the dead had grown 4 times the size it was before he warged. This was it, the entire army. Brienne and Beric helped Jon up as he looked around. The greatest army in the world was surrounding them, and the only thing that protected them from the dead was thin ice. "How many?" Jon asked. "We haven't exactly counted them all, but if I had to guess, I would say around 160,000. Jon looked around, begging that this was a nightmare to wake up from. Everyone was on edge. Tormund more than anyone. He and Sandor were sitting at the foot of the island, resting after cracking as much as the ice around it they could with their steel axes. They were trying to create a second moat the dead wouldn't be able to cross. When the outer ring freezes, the most they could do was create a single line around the foot of the island, forcing any dead to have trouble advancing from the front. I take it the ice isn't thick enough for the dead. No, but it won't be for much longer. They just don't realize it yet. If the gods were kind, Brienne said, they never would. Hours seemed to pass, and the only thing that took everyone's attention away from the army of the dead was the trading of shifts to keep the ice broken. Eventually, they managed to destroy the entire patch of ice with the border they made. Jon stood at the foot of the island, counting how many whites and black he could see. His number reached high into the hundreds as he grew upset. Jorah walked up to him, shivering and quiet. "When you killed the White Walker, almost all the dead that followed it died. Why?" "Maybe he's the one who turned them," Jon suspected. "We can go for the walkers, maybe we'll stand a chance." "No," Jon said, knowing no matter how great their skill, there would be no way they would win a head-on fight. "We need to take this one back with us to Winterfell. The dragons are on their way." Beric walked up next to them, his attention elsewhere. "They are our last hope." "No," Beric said. "There's another." He pointed his sword up at a rise, overlooking the frozen lake. "Kill him." Jon looked where the sword pointed and saw the Night King and 6 of his walkers on their undead horses. He turned them off. Everyone gathered with them to get a view of who the true enemy was. Beric made it sound easy, but Jon knew that there was more to the Night King than he showed. "You don't understand. The Lord brought you back. The Lord brought me back. No one else, just us. Did he do it to watch us freeze to death?" "Careful, Beric!" Sandor told him. "You lost your priest. This is your last life. I've been waiting for the end for a long time. Maybe the Lord brought me here to find it. Every Lord I've ever met has been a cunt. I don't see why the Lord of Light would be any different." Anguy stayed behind them with his bow readied. "Pray this works," he whispered. In a split second, he drew his bowstring with a dragonglass arrow, knocked and released it. It sailed through the air rapidly towards the Night King. Everyone held their breath as it drew closer. The arrow was aimed straight for the head, but it was stopped inches away as the Night King caught it midair. He snapped the shaft and dropped the arrow before falling back behind his lieutenants. Obstructed. "Fuck. How many arrows you got left?" Sandor asked. "Only 2. Feathers and 3 arrowheads, but no shafts." And Guy informed as he patted a small pouch around his belt. "That was probably our only chance to kill him here. But now I know how fast they are." And Guy drew the last 2 arrows from his quiver and held one in between each of his fingers in his draw hand. "Keep your eyes on the army if this works." He quickly knocked the first arrow and released it, and did the same with the second arrow just as fast. They both sailed through the cold winds, searching for their marks. The first arrow embedded itself deep into an undead horse, causing the walker riding it to be thrown off balance, and the second arrow pierced its neck. The walker let out a deafening scream as it cracked slowly, then shattered into ice. All around the hunting party, everyone could see movement among the wights that surrounded them. Many fell, but only a few thousand, including a giant, its mammoth, and some of the animals. Well, now we know for sure how to beat them. And guys, maybe I can salvage the wood from one of the dragonglass weapons. He stopped mid-sentence, frozen by something everyone missed while looking around. Where'd the walkers go? Everyone's gaze turned back to where the White Walkers and the Night King were, and saw that they were gone. "Did they run away to cover?" Jorah asked. "I don't think so," Jon said, scanning the nearby surroundings. But as quickly as they disappeared, they showed themselves walking through the masses of their foot soldiers up to where the ice caved in. They stood with their army, motionless as they were. The Night King stood in the center of them in the open, knowing they had no chance to attack him with ranged weapons. He slowly raised his arms up as he did at Hardhome after the massacre, his eyes fixed onto Jon. What the Night King didn't notice was that Sandor knelt down behind Jon, picked up a small rock, and threw it high into the air. It sailed forward and landed right on the Night King's temple, but he was physically unaffected by it. "Dumb cunt," Sandor commented. The Night King lowered his arms and turned his gaze to Sandor, who appeared not to give a damn. Tormund and the other wildlings turned to face the Hound, amazed. "You just hit the King of the Dead with a rock," Tormund said. Sandor, looking unimpressed at his accomplishment. "If we make it back and the other free folk hear about this, you'll be a legend." Next to the Night King, a wight took a few steps forward, but the ice was still too thin, and it gave way, bringing the wight down into the cold waters. The Night King looked at the hole for a moment before looking back at Jon. He knelt down to the ice and placed his palm on it. After seconds, the patch of broken ice froze solid, and all the wights looked down at the ice. "Oh, fuck," Sandor said as a few wights began to walk over the ice, dragging their weapons on the surface, making a horrifying scraping sound. More began to follow them to the island as everyone backed up and readied their weapons for the oncoming horde. The dead avoided the broken area of ice surrounding the base of the island and went straight for the sides. "Stay away from edges." Tormund shouted, "They'll try to pull you down." Everyone kept close to the center as wights started to climb over one another onto the island. Jon raised up Longclaw and Beric's sword, ignited in his lord's fire. The first wight that made it was closest to Sandor and charged straight at him. "Fuck it," he said as he ignored Tormund's advice and ran to meet the dead man. He swung his axe hard and separated the dead man's torso from his legs. He brought his axe down on the wight's head and immediately swung at another wight that climbed over. At this point, everyone was attacking wights from all around, but they were coming in moderate waves. That all changed, however, as the broken ice began to freeze instantly from the magic of the White Walkers and the dead began to run up the foot of the island. "Form a line," Jon shouted as he dealt with 3 wights that tried to overpower him, but Longclaw's edge cut clean through all of their necks with one strike. The endless coming of the dead reminded Jon of the Battle of Bastards, but the feelings weren't about the fury of the battle, they were the fear to survive. Jon could barely keep up his defense as the wights kept coming. As soon as he killed one, another would appear faster than the first. Through the midst of the horde, Jon could notice 2 of the White Walkers joining the horde in approaching the island. One carried a sword of ice and the other a spear of ice. They didn't seem to be heading for Jon, though. Their directions were towards Jorah and Brienne, who fought defending the front. Before Jon could do anything to help them, a wight lit on fire from Beric's sword ran past him and fell onto the bound wight, attempting to ignite it. Jon chased after it and shoved it off the captured white and impaled it with long claw. He doused the flames on their captive, but the sounds of growling behind him caught his attention, and he fended off 2 whites that attacked him. One of the wildlings dragged their white further up the island to keep it away from its comrades, but as he got closer to the top, 3 other whites made it through the line and charged at him. Jon chased after them, cutting one down, another killed by the wildling with a dragonglass pike. But it was knocked away as the 3rd white started to push the wildling towards the edge. Jon ran after them and killed the white just before it reached the edge, but the wildling was about to fall from the momentum. Jon quickly reached out his hand, but the wildling's fingers only grazed his as he fell into a swarm of dead men. He disappeared. He was pulled to the ground, screaming in the shadows, as in blood spattered from his location. A moment later, the wildling stood back up with eyes of blue. From behind, Jon heard the hypnotic sounds of Valyrian steel clashing against the blades of ice. Jon turned and saw Brienne fighting against one of the walkers. She seemed to be able to hold her own against such a foe, but Jorah, on the other hand, was desperately struggling. His ability in fighting was greater with a sword, but all he had were 2 dragonglass daggers. One of them broke against the ice sword because of the brittleness of rocks. Jorah couldn't seem to parry, only dodged so that his only weapon of use against the White Walker wouldn't break. Jorah managed to catch the walker off guard and kick it onto its back, away from him, but he was unable to go for the kill because of 2 whites that protected their master. He was able to kill them, but the walker got back up and was about to face Jorah again. "Jorah!" Jon shouted. Jorah turned around as Jon flipped Longclaw in his hand and tossed the sword to him, hoping he would catch it in time. The sword twirled in the air right before Jorah caught the handle and spun to meet the walker. He clashed the sword and in moments decapitated the White Walker. Some of the whites collapsed just before Brienne impaled Oathkeeper into the White Walker she fought. Many more whites fell after, but not enough to lighten the horde that grew closer. "Fall back," Jon ordered as he picked up the broken pike and began to fend off whites that climbed from behind the line of warriors. From the front, Jon heard strange screeches made and saw a squad of white direwolves charging forward. The ice underneath one of the larger ones collapsed and it fell into the water, but 6 more were on the way. The ones in their way were the last wildling, Jorah, the Hound, Brienne, and Tormund. Anguy threw one of his daggers into the head of one direwolf, but the rest made it to the island. They all leaped at the line. Tormund dodged his while slicing the belly with his halberd. Jorah and Brienne fell backwards and impaled theirs. Sandor dodged his, but it switched its attention to Jon and charged after him, while the last one leaped onto the last wildling, avoid his spear and tearing into his neck. Sandor had ditched his axe and stabbed the direwolf with a dragonglass dagger and fell back with the others as Jon fought the last direwolf. He dodged it and delivered a strike to its neck, but it wasn't deep enough for the power of the glass to kill it. It jumped on top of him, but Jon was able to put the pike into the mouth of the direwolf, keeping from biting at him. He wrestled with it and lost grip of the pike, and it was tossed aside. Jon managed to grab hold of his own dragonglass dagger and stab it deep into the neck of the wolf, killing it. He shoved it off and crawled to the pike, instantly defending against a white as soon as he got it. Jon sheathed his dagger and had a moment to finally look around at the lake. Almost the entirety of it was covered with whites, all coming at them, but in the heart of the bleakness, fire rained down onto the horde from above and exploded on the impact it made. Drogon flew over the island and continued to breath fire, creating a wall that the dead could not pass. Rhaegal and Viserion destroyed what they could on the mountains around them, while Ygritte and Lyras lightened the force of whites attacking Jon and the others. The heat of flames melted the stinging cold away, and everyone finally had a chance to rest themselves for a moment. That was ever so brief before Rhaegal swooped down to them and landed on the island, waiting for every to get on him. "Come on!" Jon shouted as he approached his dragon. Before he could climb up, some of the whites that weren't burned had climbed onto the island and charged after Jon, staying in the way of the living so that Rhaegal could not attack them. Jon protected himself and fought against the whites, while Sandor and the others brought the white to Rhaegal. Tormund carefully climbed onto the dragon, followed by Sandor and Brienne. Yura, Beric, and Angie continued to hold back any whites that continued after them. Jon joined them as soon as he finished off his whites and allowed the others to get onto Rhaegal. He stood next to Jorah and impaled a Night's Watch white that nearly slashed at him. With enough gone that they could retreat, Jorah faced Jon momentarily and handed back Longclaw to him and ran up the island to Rhaegal. Derek followed after him after dousing his sword, and Jon was the only one left. He dropped the pike and parried an axe before killing its wielder, nearly ready to get to Rhaegal. In the corner of his eye, Jon noticed the Night King return to the ledge, holding a lance of ice, aiming up at the sky. He threw it high into the sky, the lance whistling right before it dug deep into the body of Viserion. The dragon cried out in pain as vast amounts of blood poured out of the wound as the dragon fell from the sky. Rhaegal and the other dragons screeched in a way that sounded sad as Viserion crashed into the frozen lake. He rested on the ice briefly before his eyes fell closed and he sank into the water, disappearing from sight. Everyone's mortified at what they had witnessed, except for Jon. All he felt was rage. He looked away from where Viserion crashed and destroyed 2 whites that charged after him with ease. He met the gaze of the Night King and didn't take his eyes away. The first time they looked at each other, Jon was afraid, but now he was angry, desiring the moment when the Night King would die. But the hate turned into worry as a white behind the Night King retrieved another ice lance, sheathed that in a holder on an undead horse, walking towards him. The Night King's gaze switched to Rhaegal, who was still waiting for his rider. Jon started to back away and ran to Rhaegal, hoping he would get there in time. Unexpectedly to Jon, the ice beneath him cracked and collapsed. Jon's lost his grip on Longclaw, dropping his sword as his body landed on the ice, but his legs fell into the water. He tried to crawl out, but 2 whites emerged from the water and grabbed onto his legs, pulling him down with them. Jon tried to shake them off, but he was failing and knew he would go under. "Rhaegal, leave!" he screamed out. The dragon looked him, not obeying his plea. Jon warged into the dragon and fought against Rhaegal's will with all he had, forcing the dragon to abandon him. Even though Jon was in the mind of the dragon, he felt the cold surround him, and he was dragged into the water. Rhaegal finally obeyed and spread his wings and hopped off the island, taking a moment to adjust to the weight on his back. As Rhaegal climbed to the skies, Jon remembered the lance meant for the dragon. "Watch out!" Jon's thoughts shouted as Rhaegal turned his body and was nearly missed by the lance, but it grazed his neck and get his hide. Luckily, the wound was not fatal or severe, but it left a large gash that stung. Jon returned to himself as he continued to sink down into the cold depths. He had no air in his lungs and he couldn't feel parts of his body. In the water, he was able to free himself from the white's grip on him, and starting swimming up to the surface. He emerged and gasped for air, grabbing onto the ice to keep from sinking. His furs were drenched and became heavy as he pulled himself out of the water and onto the surface. He reached for Longclaw and crawled forward a little before lying still, closing his eyes and begging for rest. He could feel the water beginning to turn to ice as he finally shook the tempting desires of death from him and stood up slowly. He gradually walked away from the island and towards an open area on the lake that the dragons didn't burn, that he could pass. It wasn't long before he heard the snarling of the whites approaching and saw the entire horde coming after him. There was no chance in the world he would have to survive this alone. As desperate as he could, Jon raised Longclaw up, not willing to die without a fight. In the distance, he saw flashes of light appear and a horse with a black-cloaked rider galloping towards him. The horse stopped near Jon and the rider dismounted, revealing his face to him. "Uncle Benjen?" Jon shivered out as Uncle grabbed hold of him and helped him onto the horse. He tore Longclaw from Jon's hands and sheathed it in its scabbard. "We don't have long, save it for later," Benjen said as he mounted the horse and spurred it forward. They both rode away from the army of the dead and the White Walkers, as Jon became to lose feeling in his arms and legs. If his gloves weren't frozen, he would have dropped Longclaw to ground. He lost consciousness and blacked out from the cold. "Damn it, Jon, stay awake." Viserion dies. Benjen saves Jon, and they both ride away together after Jon escapes the freezing water. Tyrion. The news of the Queen's pregnancy spread like wildfire. All over Winterfell, there was gossip about her and her children. It brought the mood and morale up to great heights. For Tyrion, such a thing didn't just boost his morale, it gave him hope, something he hadn't had much of lately. Because of this, he was able to handle upcoming issues with a greater performance than usual, and he was more confident in their success. Currently, he tried to have Gendry take a moment away from his forge to discuss his new status and responsibilities with Varys, but the boy seemed to calm down while working his metal. He was in the middle of forging a steel gorget and was etching something in the front of the collar. Just so we know what we're dealing with, Tyrion said, how much do you actually know of what a lord is? Lords live in castles, they have lands, servants, soldiers, and the bad ones drink wine more than they fight. Gendry told them. Tyrion turned his head to Varys, not sure whether to deny it or agree with it. It's a start, I suppose. He leaned up against an anvil that wasn't in use at the moment. From the outside, being a lord appears to be simple. You do rule over lands, people, and soldiers, but you also have a duty to them. Should problems or conflict arise, it will your job to settle such things. I told Arya the same thing I'm about to tell you. A lord doesn't rule over people. He serves them. Yes, the good lords do. All my life, I've served people. Why do I want to keep doing that? Because Varys intervened, you will be showing the people that they have a good place to call home. A place they know they can be safe and live happily. You yourself grew up in King's Landing under the rule of your father, Joffrey, Tommen, even Cersei. How did that work out? Gendry paused at his work, thinking over Varys' question. I had a job. I made money. I even had a small place to live, but everyone else didn't seem that lucky. There wasn't a day in the city when there wouldn't be a dead body in one of the streets. I would have left sooner, but I had nowhere else to go. Am I correct in guessing that every one of those dead bodies had the same problem? Tyrion asked. Gendry nodded silently and resumed his work. I've never been to the Stormlands myself, but I do know that it's better there than it is in King's Landing. As a lord, you could make sure that there wouldn't have to be horrific things in the kingdom like there are in King's Landing. It won't be easy work, that's the truth of it, but best things in life are never easy to get. Gendry looked up and scowled at him for stating the obvious. I already know everything you're telling me. I'm a smith. I spend days to weeks making the best of what I can. What I don't know is why I have to do it at all. Can't I just have others take care of those problems for me? Your father chose to live his life the easy way and let others do the work for him. And we all know how that turned out. Tyrion let that sink in for a minute so Gendry could understand. You don't have to all the work by yourself. You can have others to help guide you. In fact, we were thinking of asking someone whom you trust. The conversation was cut short by the sound of the dragon screeching in the sky. Everyone looked up and saw Ygritte, Drogon and Rhaegal fly over the castle to the fields. Varys informed Tyrion earlier that Brandon Stark informed him that the dragons left to rescue the hunting party. Desperate to know the outcome, Tyrion rushed from the forge with Gendry and Varys to go see if they were successful. When they exited the gates, now joined by a few soldiers, Tyrion could see more men than had left dismounting Rhaegal. Among them was a bound person with a bag over its head. Tyrion and the others stopped to keep their distance from the dragons, and took a moment to notice the bound person's rotting flesh and despicable growls. They did it, Tyrion said as he pressed forward alone, grinning at the success. He saw Tormund, Brienne, and Jorah among others. He did not expect to see, lowering the undead body off the dragon, was Sandor Clegane. The others on the ground who caught the body were two men Tyrion did not know of. The moment the hound jumped off the dragon, Rhaegal roared and spread his wings. The force of his flaps knocked Tyrion backwards onto the ground as he took to the skies, flying back to north, leaving the other dragons behind. When Tyrion picked himself up, he noticed that there was still one dragon missing among those he's seen. Returned. Tyrion, Jorah said as he approached him, we captured a white, but we paid a terrible price. Viserion died, Tyrion asked with disbelief. He thought nothing could kill the dragons. Daenerys won't take this well, even after the blessing that's happened. What blessing? Jorah asked. Daenerys is pregnant with twins. Tyrion hoped that would uplift Jorah's spirits, but he looked even more distressed. Something else happened. He suspected Viserion wasn't the only one who fell beyond the wall. Jorah turned to face everyone else who came with him, revealing a terrible fate to Tyrion. He became mortified when he realized what Jorah meant. He became filled with hate towards himself and his stupidity. All of his plans he's made to benefit Daenerys backfired ever since they returned to Westeros. He lost Dorne, the Reach, and the Iron Islands. Now, because of him, the kingdoms had lost their king. I'll be the one to tell her. Tyrion said quietly as he turned around and walked back to the castle, silent to everyone and himself. He stood outside the door to Daenerys' room and hesitated to knock. He'd never had to do something like this before, and he was afraid to. He thought of how he could make things up to her, but then he realized that nothing could. You don't have to do it alone. A woman said from behind him. Tyrion didn't need to turn around to recognize Missandei's voice. You know, everyone does. It doesn't take long for words to travel. The only one who doesn't know is in that room. I figured as much. He finally turned to face Missandei, who looked just as scared as he did. Please come with me. He wasn't sure if he could tell Daenerys alone. Missandei nodded to him, giving a saddened but reassuring smile. Tyrion knocked on the door and waited, every second feeling like a lifetime. Come in, Daenerys said. Tyrion opened the door and walked out the room with Missandei close behind him. Daenerys was in her bed, still resting from her sickened episode. Tyrion, Missandei, what do I owe the pleasure? Tyrion couldn't look her in the eye. He didn't have the courage to. Daenerys, the dragons returned with those that went north of the wall. They were able to capture a white. Daenerys somehow could feel his sorrow radiating from him and knew something was wrong. What happened? Not everyone made it back, and not all the dragons. He finally looked up to her and saw her afraid of what he would tell her. Viserion died at the hands of the Night King. From what I was told, Jon fell shortly afterwards. Daenerys looked away from him to the foot of her bed, looking as if she were begging for the news not to be true. Her mouth began to shiver, and she was on the verge of tears. Tyrion walked over to an end table and removed his handpin. After one too many failures, I would like to resign as your hand. He placed the pin on the table and left it there. I'm sorry, he walked out of the room, leaving Daenerys with Missandei. Even as he got far from the room, he could hear her crying echo throughout the hallways. Rickon. Everyone was disappearing, all around him. First Ghost left, then Jon, then Arya. Even with Bran helping Rickon develop his green sight, he couldn't find Ghost anywhere in the north. The news about Jon devastated him. But even when he heard it, he didn't cry. He felt sad, but he wouldn't allow himself to show weakness. But in case he couldn't hold back his tears, he decided to be with the only person who didn't care. Bran. The two of them sat together in the Godswood, not saying anything to the other. Bran had his hand placed on the weirwood, having a vision of gods know where. Rickon didn't want to join him. He had too much to think about. With Jon gone, what would happen? Would they win the fight against the dead? Should they just leave the north and sail to an island? Too many questions, no one to answer them. One question lingered in Rickon's mind more than any other. Why do people I love have to die? His father, Sir Roderick, his mother, Robb, Osha, Shaggy Dog, and now Jon. What started all these things that led to so much death? Was it when Littlefinger killed Jon Arryn and said it was the Lannisters? Was it when Rhaegar ran away with his aunt Lyanna? Or was it when his father died that everyone else followed after him? What event was the stone that was thrown down a mountain that became a rock slide? Rickon couldn't take any more. He needed to get away from all of it, and he knew exactly how. He stood up from the snow-covered ground and placed his hand on Bran's shoulder, following him to wherever he was. Instantly, Rickon found himself standing next to Bran on a cliff, overlooking a frozen lake with a small island in the middle. You're just in time, Bran told him, as he pointed down to the coast of the lake. Look down there. Rickon followed where Bran pointed and saw a familiar evil. He met face to face. The Night King. He's already seen me, but he doesn't seem to care. In fact, he wants me to see. See what? Watch. From behind the Night King, a stampede of undead giants, consisting of at least 30, charged to the frozen lake. The moment the first one stepped onto the ice, it cracked and gave in. Despite knowing this, the giants continued to run to the lake and fall through the ice into the water. What are they doing? Bran didn't say anything. He just kept watching. Moments later, the heads of some of the giants emerged from the water very slowly as they all tugged hard to get something extremely heavy out of the water. As their entire bodies came out drenched and heavily dripping, they pulled and pushed the body of the bronze-colored dragon. Rickon couldn't remember the name as the giants brought the body all the way onto the land and let go of it. They backed away as the Night King walked forward to the dragon's head and placed his hand upon it. After just mere seconds, the dragon opened its eyes, and they were a color of an icy blue. That's how he'll do it. Bran said openly, he's going to destroy the wall with Viserion. As the dragon began to get back on its feet, the Night King looked at Bran and Rickon, showing a faint smile. Time to go. Bran put his hand on Rickon's shoulder, and they left the Night King and the undead dragon, but they weren't back in Winterfell. They were in the middle of a forest, still beyond the wall. From behind, Rickon heard the sounds of a fire burning and turned to see a man of the Night's Watch sitting next to one. His horse was tied up to a tree, and slung over the saddle was a large object wrapped in a Night's Watch cloak. "Good to see you again," the man said as he tossed a large stick onto his fire. "Is the dragon on its way?" "Rickon just flew over the wall as we speak," Bran informed the stranger. "He can hear us," Rickon asked, but was ignored. "Rhaegal," the man inquired, after his blood father. "How fitting." The man turned around to face Bran and Rickon, revealing his face. "You brought Rickon with you." The man looked like a corpse, slowly decomposing, but he wasn't a soldier of the Night King. "He can see us too?" Rickon was very confused as to who this person was. Being undead gives one certain abilities. He cracked a small comforting smile to Rickon as he kept his distance. "This our Uncle Benjen," Bran informed. "He's been beyond the wall fighting against the dead as best he can." "Uncle Benjen?" Rickon couldn't remember ever meeting him before now, but he did see some resemblance to their father. "I saw you once at the feast Ned held for Robert Baratheon, though you were too young to remember." "Jon left with me to join the Watch." "I'm sorry." "It's all right. There's nothing to be sorry about." Rickon's eyes turned to the horse, and at the object over the saddle. "What's under the cloak?" "Best you not know yet." The trees suddenly began to shudder, and a great wind blew through the branches. The ground shook a moment later as the winds calmed down and a familiar screech was heard. "He's here," Bran informed before he suddenly vanished, leaving Rickon with Benjen. "Why is Rhaegal here?" Benjen chuckled a small bit as he untied the reins of his horse and guided it through the trees. "You're full of curiosity, aren't you?" "Much has been happening on both sides of the wall," Rickon informed as he walked with his uncle. "Like what?" "Bran never visits me, and I've been here for near 7 years. I know Ned was murdered. I already knew about Jon since he was a boy, and the world's practically gone to shit. But we're short on time, so give me the short version. After Father was murdered by Joffrey because he found out Father knew he was a bastard, Robb called the banners and went to war. So did Renly and Stannis Baratheon, and Balon Greyjoy after Theon betrayed us. Bran and I fled Winterfell, and I stayed south while Bran went north. I rescued him from the dead after his training with Brendan." "Who?" "Another story for another time. Continue." "I traveled to the Last Hearth to seek help from the Umbers, but Small John betrayed me and gave me to Boltons. It was then I learned that Robb and Mother were betrayed by the Boltons in the frays and murdered. Robb's dead? What about your sisters?" "Sansa's at Winterfell and Arya's in the Riverlands to save Aunt Roslyn and Cousin Stefan from the Lannisters. Once she does, we'll have the Riverlands loyal to us." That news was relieving to Benjen as they left the woods and entered a clearing where Bran and Rhaegal were waiting for them. "This is where I leave you for now. You're not flying with Rhaegal. Bran's using as much influence as he can to keep that dragon from burning me to ash. I'll be heading to Eastwatch after this. Now that every wildling north of the wall is turned, the main army will be meeting with the reserves far to the north on their way to the wall." Benjen stopped his horse and pulled the object off onto his shoulders and carried it to Rhaegal. "The reserves?" What Jon and his companions saw was the bulk of the army of the dead. After their skirmish, there's about 150,000 foot soldiers left. But that's not the entire army. There's another 70,000 in the lands of Always Winter, marching south. Rickon was speechless. Not only was there an undead dragon, but now there would be over 200,000 of the undead coming for them all. Benjen casually climbed onto Rhaegal and placed what he carried on the dragon's neck before tying it down with a long rope. When he was done, he hopped down and Rhaegal growled fiercely at him before taking to the skies. He walked back to his horse and looked over to Rickon. "We'll see each other again, nephew. Maybe when the war's over and the true north is free of the dead, I'll show you some of the beauty this land has to offer." Before Rickon could say anything, Bran placed his hand on Rickon's shoulder and brought them back to Winterfell. Rickon let go of Bran and took a minute to rest against the weirwood. "What was that he tied to the dragon?" "Jon's body," Bran said bluntly. Benjen managed to rescue Jon from the Whites after the dragons left, but the cold took him afterwards. He's being brought back to us. Rickon had a moment of hope, but Bran's knowledge shattered it instantly. "We'll bury him in the crypts next to Aunt Lyanna." "No, we won't. Someone's coming to help him." "How can anyone help him? He's dead." "Didn't he ever tell you how he was released from the Night's Watch?" Rickon suddenly realized he never asked Jon about that. Neither did Sansa or Arya. In fact, he was sure no one did. What happened? Brienne. The news of Arya leaving left Brienne upset. She went north to keep her safe in Winterfell. And days later, she leaves to go into just as much danger. However, given the current situation and the events that transpired, now wasn't the time to brood over such things. Everyone was in need of time to mourn the loss of their king. Brienne had finally changed out of her heavy furs and into a thick tunic and cloak. Her armor was still at Eastwatch, and a raven was already sent to have Sir Davos return with everyone's gear. It did not, however, contain the news of the dragon and the king's demise. Such news would be better said in person. The only thing to help push through the situation was to train with Pod. Unfortunately for him, Brienne had been venting her anger into her swordplay. They didn't even spar for 10 minutes before Pod begged for a break. While he sat against a railing, Brienne just leaned against her sparring sword. She became shocked as Pod removed his glove and revealed a nasty bruise below his wrist. Podrick, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to hit so hard. It's all right, milady. Arya Stark said every injury is lesson. You've been practicing with Arya? Whenever I could, though, she didn't hold back as much. The two of them were joined by the Hound, who was carrying a sparring sword. Have you come for a rematch, Clegane? Bran asked casually. Fuck off, he spat. Beric's speaking with the Stark girl, and your wildling lover is off moping like a lost little boy somewhere. He's not my lover. Tell that to him. He wouldn't shut up about you the whole journey north. I know. I heard everything he said, she said harshly. Then are you going to tell us fantasies about you, or are you going to show me some steel? Brienne approached him quickly with her sword ready for combat. She swung high and was immediately blocked by Sandor. Already she could tell that his strength was greater than when they first fought, but her advantage was a small limp he had in his right leg. She pressed forward, putting on the defense, but he knew better than to let something like a limping leg get the better of him. What Brienne saw as an opening turned out to be a trap, and as she fell into it, the Hound swept his foot underneath Brienne's leg and toppled her to the ground. Before she could even try to get up, the end of Sandor's sword was at her neck. Not willing to give up just yet, Brienne slid her head to the side and grabbed the blade with her free hand and held tightly to it. She pulled the Hound forward and used her legs to flip him over her onto the ground. She sprawled up to her knees and held her sword against his neck. Any movement and a real sword would cut a vital artery. You're stronger, but not smarter, Brienne told him. No shit. You don't have to be smart to kill. Just strong. Brienne stood up to her feet and offered her hand to him. He was hesitant, but he accepted her offer nonetheless. Before they could have another match, a Hound blasted that meant someone or something significant was approaching the gates. Brienne, Sandor, and Podrick left the training yard to go see what was going on. Through the gates, a familiar woman clad in red robes, not suited for winter, rode in on horseback, followed by an escort of 4 men in very extravagant armor with a fire theme. Their faces all had tattoos of flames across their cheeks. She dismounted as Lord Tyrion and Lord Varys walked to meet her. Lady Melisandre, Lord Varys said, I didn't expect you to return. I told you before, Spider, I would return to the north and I would die in the north, just as you will. Luckily, Davos Seaworth isn't here yet. He's on his way back from Eastwatch by the sea, and he won't be here for at least a fortnight. I know, I had a vision in the flames that now is the time for me to return. Is the king here? I have business with him. My lady, Tyrion said softly, the king died beyond the wall during a hunt for the dead. Melisandre closed her eyes and took a deep breath, trying to remain calm. She did her best not to look affected by this news. May I be granted an audience with the queen? I come with the offer of help for the war. I'm afraid the queen has shut herself in her room for the time being. The only one she'll see is her advisor, Missandei. Do you know her? Sandor asked Brienne. I met her at Castle Black when I brought Sansa there. She was an advisor to the king before he banished her. Let me guess. She did something for the Lord of Light. She burned Shireen Baratheon at the stake. I've killed children before, Sandor admitted. Never got banished for it. I was always rewarded for it. Varys and Tyrion led Melisandre and her escort inside the castle, while everyone else went about their business. Evening fell, and the skies grew clear for once. Such a thing was rare in the north during the winter, and the colors of twilight danced among the clouds, far in the horizon. Brienne decided to take a shift on the battlements on watch duty. Her anger was gone, but now she felt she needed to calm down, and the view of the north was always beautiful to look at. The sky began to twinkle in the east as stars began to sprout. There would be no moon tonight, and Brienne was looking forward to the view of the night sky. Brienne was looking over the eastern wall to what lied beyond, barely seeing the fires of camps in the distance. She, as well as many others, were informed that there was an army of near 1,000 men from Essos that came to fight alongside everyone against the dead. Supposedly, they had the magic to ignite their weapons in fire just as Beric Dondarrion could. As she kept her gaze on the fires, checking for any suspicious movements, she noticed out of the corner of her eye a blackened figure in the sky, coming from the north. She turned her gaze and could barely make out the shape. It was the green dragon returning from his journey. As she kept her eyes on him as he got closer to the castle, flying low to the ground, she saw something fall of the dragon's back and into the snow-covered fields of Winterfell. The dragon didn't seem to notice as he flew over the castle to join his brother and the other dragons. Curious to see what it was, she left her post to investigate.
As she exited to the gates, followed by a pair of guards, she kept her eyes on the location where the object fell. In the white of the snow, she could see a blackened figure moving. Brienne picked up her pace and started to run at whatever it was. As she got closer, she could identify a Night's Watch cloak attached to the wearer who was buried in the snow. She dug through the snow and saw the face of who wore the cloak. It was Jon. He was alive. Your Grace. She turned to the guards who were still a distance from her. Get help. The king is alive. Jon lifted a hand onto her shoulder to steady himself. It's all right, Your Grace. You're back home. She was cut off abruptly when Jon's other hand shot around her neck and began to choke it tightly. She couldn't breathe, and the tension began to hurt immensely. Brienne didn't understand why he would do something like this until he lifted his head up to her and revealed eyes that were bluer than ice.